I'm going to call to order the February 15th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by the President of the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce, Mayor Sulpizio.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the parcels named in our closed session agenda, Heritage Oak Parks and 2925 Ramco Street, and in negotiations with Clutterwald USA and Prologic Incorporated, respectively, to confer with our legal counsel regarding one matter of substantial exposure to litigation, and to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with all bargaining groups, and on all of those items, no action was taken. So we're going to proceed now to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, we're precluded by state law from taking action on any items that are brought up in testimony under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and to turn that card into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to assure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. And to that end, we ask that all the comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and the flip chart simply indicates which agenda item the City Council is currently considering. We take the cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any agenda item other than 1A, for which there is no staff report. So if you're here, for example, on item 12, we take the card up to the conclusion of the report by the staff person. Once the City Council's questions and the public testimony has begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests. So if you already know in advance that you're here for a specific item, try to get your card in as soon as you can, but definitely by the conclusion of the staff report. We also recognize that for some folks speaking in public and before an audience of millions on TV and on the internet can cause some nervousness and anxiety. So just out of mutual respect, we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or actually any other applause or other demonstrations, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have no request to speak under item 1A, so we're going to proceed directly to item 1B, which are council communications. Are there any reports or other communications this evening? Councilmember Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency met on January 19th. We approved a revolving line of credit to assist with liquidity needs and funding the Southport Sacramento River Levee Improvement Project. And we also learned that levee work is anticipated to start in April, although utility relocation may be delayed due to recent storms. I also, let's see. I've also been involved in multiple meetings since our last council meeting regarding the YOLO Sustainable Groundwater Management Act implementation, and our Sustainable Groundwater Agency will be forming a JPA with a dozen or so plus other entities, and background on that will be coming to us in the next several months. And I also served on a panel at a public meeting in Woodland last week along with a representative of the Farm Bureau, a Woodland City Council member, and a private groundwater pumper. And we answered questions about the implementation process and the planning going on right now in Yolo County. Also, the Port Commission met earlier this evening. We met in closed session.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Orozco.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Regional Sanitation Board met on February 8, 2017, and discussed several items, one of which is we unanimously approved the 2017 legislative and regulatory policies for the SAC Regional Sanitation District and Sacramento Area Sewer District. We also heard a presentation, and the board approved the contribution of $25,000 to Yolo County for Regional Sanitation's District Operations Fund for the abatement of abandoned boats in the Sacramento River. We received a presentation related to the impacts of abandoned boats, specifically the safety hazard and pollution in our local waterways. As some of us know, Yolo County has spent approximately $38,000 in its vessel abatement grant to abate about 7 boats, but has identified additional boats in our waterways that need to be removed. It has also taken steps to strengthen the county code related to vessel sanitation and mooring. Regional Sanitation Board members unanimously agreed to partner and move forward together to take a more regional approach toward removing vessels and cleaning up our waterways.
Sure. Thank you. I think at this point now, only a few folks in our team remember that West Sacramento was one of the early leaders in the vessel abatement issues on the Sacramento River, in addition to the deep water shipping channel over almost 20 years ago now. So it's good to see that work. And I know Supervisor Villegas has been playing a lead role in this work as well, so building on that. Did you have any other?
No.
Okay. Mr. Ledesma?
Yeah, I just have a quick item. On February 1st, we had a meeting of the Streetcar Policy Steering Committee. We went over some of the updates on the governance structure, which we're going to get a briefing on tonight, I believe, and also we talked through some of the financing options that are being undertaken on the city of Sacramento side. So I'll save the rest for a discussion later, but it was I thought it was one of the more, I guess, the content of that meeting was one of the substantial we've had in some time. So I want to thank our staff who kind of prepped us for that meeting, and we really got a lot done at that meeting, I felt. So we'll get an update tonight. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Yolo Housing Authority met this today, and the most significant item is we reviewed the financial audits for the 2015-2016 year. Everything was clean, clean bill of health for that organization, and also I was selected as chair of Yolo Housing. Will Arnold is going to be the vice chair.
All right. Nice job. Congratulations. I had a couple of reports. Actually, Councilmember Sandina in a different role, and then I, on behalf of the municipal officials, I guess, in the region, serve both on the steering committee for Align Capital Region. It's a new region-wide effort to align education, both K-12 and higher education, and workforce, employers, and other civic actors in the region around a common set of strategies and agendas. It's in the organizational stage. The official launch is about to come forward, but we're certainly looking to share what we're doing on Measure E and the Kids Home Run and the work we've been doing on internships and summer steps as potential models for other cities in the region to be able to scale that work and then to help employers and schools and colleges connect better with us in work like that. So as I said, it's just beginning, and it's building on work in the past, but we're both participating in that session. Also, the city manager and I and probably other folks on our team joined a regional convening on homelessness that Sutter Health sponsored as part of their Getting to Zero project. We presented on Bridge to Housing and on the work that we've been doing to follow up on Bridge to Housing, potentially in partnership with Sutter, that the council's been, briefed on and discussed extensively at the strategic planning retreat, as well as the work we've been doing on startups and residents in this space as well. I think we had 2 presentations. Yolo County had a couple of presentations, and there were only 6 total. So Yolo showed itself, and Bridge to Housing showed really well at that convening. And Sutter's already setting up a follow-up session of essentially the real actors, the folks who really get stuff done and have some innovative ideas. And we've been invited to participate in that as well. So we're building a very solid relationship with Sutter and with other major employers around real solutions for us leveraging the investment that the voters approved for Measure E in the homelessness space. Also, the city clerk's office and city attorney's office and I did the board and commission orientation last week, and it was remarkable. I mean, we have a very strong, first of all, I wasn't at the last council meeting, so thanks to the council for approving the appointments to the boards and commissions, but a great set of questions, very solid group of commissioners, and a very strong orientation, and we spent a lot of time going over the council's strategic plan that's up for vote tonight, but that had just been developed hours before at our retreat as well. Yesterday, I wanted to let council know the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, John Laird, gave me a call for an update and for a briefing and to share information about the situation at the Oroville Dam. and just to compare notes about emergency response and about communications, also the status of the dam itself. As the council is well aware, because the council has been briefed extensively and in constant communication with our own emergency services team and the city manager, we've had a very tight relationship between our emergency management and Yolo County and the state emergency services, as well as DWR. I conveyed that our appreciation to the secretary for that, and he noted that we've been a key actor in that space as well. Did ask for help, and I asked for some additional information about some of the prior reports and studies that have been done on the dam and its the potential implications for West Sacramento in a catastrophic event, and they're providing that to us into the future. But our team at City Hall and in Fire and the manager did a great job of marshaling the community, making sure folks knew what was happening. So I want to extend that appreciation to our team and to our residents who got prepared, who were paying attention very carefully, didn't panic, but were, as a community living behind levees, this is a constant state of being for us. This particular incident was just a reminder to pay attention and to be ready and to be calm and prepared. So that was good work. I was not at the last council meeting because I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I wanted to report on a couple of those elements. I facilitated a summer job session with the mayors of Louisville and Philadelphia and the Boys and Girls Clubs of America around best practices and city initiatives around summer jobs. And because of what we've been doing with Summer Steps and some of our other programs here in the community and the guaranteed internship component of Measure E for high school students. I learned a lot there, but also there were a lot of communities around the country that were very interested and as usual, impressed with what's going on here in terms of what we're doing for youth employment as well. So there'll be some follow-up reports from that we'll share with the council. I also led a session on the implications of trade and technology and autonomous vehicles for workforce, for dislocated workers, for workforce preparation. And because the estimates around automation, artificial intelligence, and autonomous vehicles are 50 to 60% of jobs in the country could be displaced. So that's not a trivial figure. And although the incidence of those jobs are not even across the country, the impact would be severe everywhere, including here. So we're trying to get a head start in retooling the workforce development systems and other policies and programs within cities to try to prepare as quickly as we can to retool our old workforce development systems in ways that are more demand responsive in that space. So we're working with the Federal Reserve on that project as well. I think I reported to the council previously, we joined the Alliance for Sustainable Cities, which is a coalition of cities and philanthropy and companies around the work on climate change. It's us and the Mayor of Santa Fe, the Mayor of Des Moines, Iowa, and a couple of others that are in the lead, but working primarily right now on the Volkswagen settlement and trying to make sure that cities like ours are able to tap into the resources from the Volkswagen settlement in a significant way around alternative fuel vehicles, both electric and hydrogen, but also some other particular opportunities for us. So the EV and hydrogen stuff is particularly timely at the moment, and there is a state fund that is coming in that space, so we're trying to make sure that we have a head start there. So I met with the economy minister for Japan in DC, because they're still trying to figure out what the new trade relationships look like. So I think they see our city as one of their anchor cities in the U.S., which is positive. So and it was the same day that we announced the location of Makuni Color here in the city, so that was reinforced as well. But I think it's a very solid relationship, and the government of Japan sees West Sacramento as one of its key individual partners within the country. I took the opportunity to make the case more on rice and reducing some of the trade barriers on rice post-Trans-Pacific Partnership as well. They heard me. We'll see where we get on that space, but that continues to be a key priority for us. And then John Robinson and I met with the Chief of Staff for the new Chief of Staff for Senator Kamala Harris, and with the Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Matsui as well. Finally, I presented. We were the lead presenter in the Aging Task Force in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. AARP had suggested that West Sacramento, as perhaps their leading case model in the country, present to all the other mayors in the U.S. about the work that Councilmember Sandine and Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson and John Robinson and our whole staff have been doing on age-friendly communities. It was remarkable very, very well-received presentation about the changes that we've made in our commission structure, but also what we're doing on the ground, and the survey work and how that's informed the general plan. Really, really strong. So it was taped. We'll get a copy of that. Also, on that same day was released a big report that I think most of the council has seen, that features Mr. Johannessen's mom as part of the case, the story of what's happening in West Sacramento. So really great. It was a couple days in DC and a tough week. It was right before the inauguration, but it was great to see sort of repeatedly West Sacramento highlighted in so many different domains as a key actor and model for the rest of the country. Sandine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also the Public Financing Authority, we had our inaugural meeting on, I believe, February 1st, and congratulations to you and Councilmember Ledesma for being the first chair and vice chair of that agency, of any public financing authority in the whole world. And, I mean, we just set out the work ahead of us and got going, so.
That's terrific, thank you. All right, if there's no other communications, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. We have none of them this evening. We'll also have the alternate member of the Board of Appeals resigned from the board due to a change in residency, so we'll also have that slot open. Expect to bring those appointments for the remaining openings to the council in March. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 19. Are there any items for separate consideration or for question or comment?
Item 9. You called for 8, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Same ones, or? Anyone else? I have 18. Oh, and we also have memos at the desks on 14 and 18, I think on consent. So we'll pull 14 for a public comment as well, which we have. And I think that's everything. Yep, okay, so item 8 is consideration of presentation on the 2016 fourth quarter report on 21st century policing. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, yeah, just a quick question. This was, I think it's looks like a great program. Looks like you're going to be gathering the data that's going to be necessary, not only to see where you've been, but where you're going to go. But one of the things I didn't see in here is there any consideration of race at all in the statistics? Because, you know, one of the issues I think we've discussed is, you know, maybe precursors to profiling or precursors to problems that may be more race-related. Is there anything in this program that kind of maybe gets to that statistic-wise, or?
If we're looking at the RIPA reference, is that what we're referencing?
No,
in this
in the
report?
programs in general, any of these programs.
So, yeah, RIPA, I think by its purpose, will have us keeping data on so many different fields that should end up, if it works well, providing that information for us. It'll demand that information from us, one, but it'll enable us to be able to do that analysis so we can try to do more early intervention if we see anything, or at least it will enable us to more accurately look at the things we need to analyze that hopefully will surface any budding issue if we think it is one. But right now, you know, our outcome data is limited to really just 3 fields, and it has to be arrests, field interview, documentations, or citations, and those are the only areas right now that we can analyze because they have that outcome.
All right, and how is this other data collected then for the RIPA?
It is still yet to come. It's a big challenge. One, the Department of Justice hasn't fully actually come out with their final demands as far as what fields will be required, what data will be required to be reported. The large agencies in the state of California are faced with that requirement, compliance with that requirement in 2019. Ours falls to 2023 for our size agency. And really our hope is that in the meantime, a lot of the technology that needs to develop both on the DOJ end of receiving that data, but also on the platforms for us to capture that data. We're hoping to really capitalize on those large agencies and the things that they learn in developing that technology.
All right, well, thank you.
Mr. Ledesma?
Yeah, and on this item, just thanks for sharing the information as you have. And it was a little bit on Mayor Pro Tem Johannessen's question around ensuring that if there are other, ways we can get data. I know that's something we started to establish last year a little bit, and seeing some of this a little in depth. And there's opportunity to do that. I would really like to continue seeing that. It can be offline, but certainly it is worth us kind of taking a look at and making sure. I know we're waiting, and I understand the issues, why kind of waiting how we capture the required data, and when we'll become, we have to become compliant with that. But I think we still need to continue focusing on those areas, because we did establish some protocols and some good dialogue around that last year, and I want to see that continue if that's possible. Other than that, I also want to, I appreciate you highlighting the crisis intervention training that you did highlight. I know that per our 2017 goals and priorities for the year, we talked about mental health support services, and I know Sacramento has put some attention on training for on mental illness for officers, how to engage them. I suspect this is sort of like that. I'm not sure if it's the same program that Sacramento had endeavored, but if that's something maybe we can offline, we can get an answer to if it's the same thing. But even having this amount was
Yeah,
good.
the crisis intervention training for our first responders has been in place now for a few years, and we are proud that we have this 100% compliance with our officers of getting attendance at that training. And it is remarkably similar to the training that the officers in Sacramento are receiving.
Okay.
How they deploy resources may be a little different.
Okay.
That to focus on that, but the training is if not the same, remarkably similar.
All right.
That's not the caliber training, is it? Is that a different set of training?
That's a different set.
So you may know, we have received, or at least I've received some concerns about the caliber piece. I'd like to get some background, not here, but to understand more the issues that are being raised around the way in which we're doing training around those kinds of situations.
Absolutely.
Because and I agree with all the comments. I mean, it's a good step. It didn't feel like a 21st century policing. It felt like this was the same kind of report I would get in the 20th century.
Gotcha.
In terms of, here's the overall crime statistics, principally, and here's our professional development plan, but as a template to start moving forward with the richer data sets and the more discrete data sets around race and some of the and neighborhoods and other stuff that we've been interested in. It's a good start. So, thank you. I'm going to take us back to item 7. Actually, I forgot I had just a question or comment on the. On the consideration of Resolution 17-11, adopting findings, statement of overriding considerations, mitigation monitoring plan, and certifying the Washington District Sustainable Community Infrastructure Plan, final environmental impact report, Resolution 17-8, delegating authority of the city manager to undertake certain actions to commence and complete real property transactions for the construction of the Washington Infrastructure Improvement. Question actually just on the EIR. So I thought we were beyond this approach to EIRs, and maybe you can just help me understand why I'm wrong. So if I'm wrong, we can go back to the legislature one more time. It still characterizes all. So this is a transit priority area. I think it's definitely in the 375 area, sustainable communities area. But it's still, this EIR is like out of the 1970s. It's no project means there's no impacts whatever, but a project means more air quality reductions and all of that. And the 375 itself, and then the follow-up legislation on TPAs and everything else was supposed to give us the ability to start being honest about this, which is without this project, then that places pressure on housing and land development in other places that do result in climate emissions and some of the other negative effects that we've talked about. And so reading this only, you think, well, maybe no project is the better thing, but no project is actually environmentally no project is not the preferred alternative environmentally, because the alternatives are building somewhere else. And I thought the law had allowed us now to start referencing the blueprint and the MTP and the SCS EIR on those sorts of issues in order to not have to override on those or to make statement or to lead the public into thinking that this is an environmental net loss.
I probably would think the city attorney would be better to respond to that.
You are correct that that was the goal. The statutes are written in ways that are sometimes difficult to navigate through by the people who are writing the EIRs. And I know there were some particular issues here. To be honest, we were not terribly involved in the preparation of this EIR. So,
It was my understanding those guidelines are not quite in place. They're almost in place. We were, because of the added underground infrastructure, wanting to do the appropriate documentation so that we could proceed with that aspect of the project.
All right, so when we're voting for statements of overriding consideration, which tend to mostly be on air quality stuff, this one is not. It's on cultural resources. It's just helpful the extent to which the documents recognize that we're making a difficult vote. We're saying that despite the fact that there are these irreversible environmental impacts, we're still doing the project. And so the extent to which even if the findings don't change, but the narrative at least references that, but if we don't build here, this is what happens.
Sure.
As maybe some template of instructions to future EIR consultants that, just even if you're waiting on the guidance for specific changes in what the actual finding is, you could still be clearer about what the real environmental effects are in the narrative. So appreciate it.
Great.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Okay, item 9 is consideration of retention and release policy regarding police mobile audio, video, integrated body worn camera, and other police recordings.
This has to do, I think, has to do with Paul. I had just a question. So I couldn't catch him before he went back to 7 because I saw you sitting down, so I was going to keep you up there, but he jumped the gun. I just have a basic question because this is sort of new to us, that we have a policy on this and how we retain and release eventually. And I just want to make sure, in evaluating this policy, is it typical or is it for other cities to delegate that to the city manager's purview and what maybe is I'm just trying to get a comparative landscape of how other cities may do it, because I think that's kind of where, I just want to see where that fit into the thinking here.
I will say that when it came to developing the police operational policy, there was a lot more reference material. This is an area where, though probably not completely novel, it is a little bit of a new frontier. So
Yeah.
I can't say that there was a lot of reference material to speak to what you're referring to as far as who ultimately that responsibility is delegated to. I can say that in the development of this, we were trying to be thoughtful that was going to be an informed decision with a lot of input from not only law enforcement here in the city, but anyone else that was a relevant stakeholder in making that decision. So I don't really have a good answer as far as reference material for that.
Okay. Because I think that I can see the pragmatic sort of view on it, that the city manager would have all the information, be working on it, and think the consideration. But that a council or mayor or elected official have some input into that, I guess it's assumed in that decision-making, that whether to release that information. We're not in a situation where we have to worry about this moment, but that would be my sort of caution in this. I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels on it, but.
I think it's an important one. I mean, we haven't had this issue. Sacramento did last year, and the council over there it was unclear as to whether or not they were being held accountable by the public for the decision. Exactly. But I think they had similar policies, which didn't give them the ability to deliver on that accountability in any sort of way. So I think it's exactly the right question. We don't anticipate having tons of these, but
No.
Ms. Orozco?
Actually, I had a separate question. With respect to the retention of data collected from body-worn cameras, will that collection be done by a third-party vendor, or is it something that's done in-house or some type of iCloud-like program?
And for the technical answer, I would have to refer to our in-house IT folks, but I can tell you that the storage is going to be retained here with the city IT having that program oversight as far as the system goes.
And I understand that it's going to be in line with Penal Code Section 832.18. And it says in that section that it's approximately 2 years. Is that what you expect for the body-worn cameras?
Minimally, yes. But of course, any kind of evidence-related recordings are going to be kept in line with the law when it comes to evidence. So we're going to meet at least the minimum legal standard at a minimum. But our city retention policy may actually exceed that in some cases.
And would that be the same of ICC or in-car camera?
Yeah, we're treating these the same, and in fact, the system that we are proposing is the only one that we found currently that's integrated with that mobile in-car camera and the body-worn camera integrated in their recording.
And we have the storage capacity for 2 years plus of all that data?
That's, with IT's work and partnership with this, that's what we are advised, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a good start. It's a good placeholder policy, but I do think there's, I mean, even so much of the policy is written in the passive voice, it's not even really clear who's making these decisions. In some, it's, consideration will be given to this, but who's considering that? I mean, ultimately, it's the city manager. The tape might be redacted, but by who? We're not expecting the city manager to be in a dark room in the basement of City Hall or going through all of these himself. So those protocols are, in the abstract, they make sense, but in the live moment when there's a case, it will make a great deal of difference as to whether the officer has the authority to redact a video, or the officer supervisor, or only you, or only the chief, or only if the city manager is signed. Those sorts of things matter a great deal in the heat of the moment. And so it's both, I think, about what where the residual authority sits, which may need to be here for the first period of this policy, not as an automatic thing, but where it can be called up. For example, where the city manager reports, here's what my decision is, and the council could call it up for the first 4 or 5 months of the policy. I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but it's an option to allow us to test this before it gets too far away from civilian accountability. But then also being clearer over time about who is making these decisions and at what sequence, and that sort of thing. I think will. It's clear from the review of other cities, and I've read the COPS office stuff and the Brennan Center stuff and others, that this is definitely not a settled matter. And at the same time, we're not trying to create a situation where people are filing Public Records Act requests for this stuff just for its entertainment value, because we've seen just on regular documents how much city resources can be devoted to that. So and we don't want to upset ongoing investigations or other issues by having just unfettered release. So we're trying to balance those issues. But the we needs to be clear about the we and the how as we're doing this. So as I said, this is a good beginning, but I wouldn't vote for this and then think it's done for 2 years. But we should be looking at how to continuously improve this set of policies.
Yeah, and I don't know what the mechanism we have to do that, because I'm with you. I read this and I had the same questions about the scenario, and most of these policies we put in place, especially around these types of public safety, law enforcement issues, we don't really think about. We put them in and put them away, but even this weekend, when we had a potential catastrophic, at least a thought of a catastrophic flood, all of a sudden, what do we mean by that? What do we do? And this is a similar situation. It's good for now, but we do need to be thinking about those things, because in the heat of the moment, as the mayor said, that's the part that I want to make sure it's clear what role we have, what role you have, and what we know to happen. Because if the outcome of it misses one of those steps, we won't know, right? We won't know. We'll just be blind to it, and that's not the accountability I have in mind. I have total trust in, and the other part I thought about is I have total trust in the city manager. He is accountable and holds himself accountable to himself and to us, which I appreciate. But it's future city managers, it's future councils, they have to live by this policy too. And so anyway, I just want to, if there's some mechanism or way to kind of revisit this in a year, again, if there's opportunity during some meetings we might have, that we can contemplate this a little further. I know you have other pressing issues to get to, but this is important for me at least to kind of make sure we define that over the next year a little more. expressly. So
Well, could
that's
we,
my thought.
on that particular issue, on the council manager one, I mean, could we just add now as a starting point? Because it'll be easier to dial it back later. It's more likely that if it turns out to be an unnecessary hassle, that you will come back to us to change it. If it turns out that it's a good policy thing, then we'll think of it, but only if it's in front of us. So I wonder if we were to do it now and say, rest with the city manager, and at its discretion, the city council, or, some language that provides for the council to be able to review or to call up or some mechanism, at least for some period of time, once implementation has begun.
Well, if I could, Mayor and Council, I would just say, maybe we take it on a practical approach and say the city manager in consultation with the city council, because that, in reality, that's what would occur. I would hope would occur. The decision would be made by the city manager in consultation with the city council.
I know the city attorney has a comment, we'll get to him in just one second, but my only concern about that is I don't actually want to be involved in every single one, right? So your proposal goes too far, right? Because we don't know what the volume's going to be, but it could be enormous, and 99% of them will not require any civilian review. I mean, it's a political review or elected official review, but we need some mechanism for that to be possible in cases where it might be appropriate.
How about something like, upon request by any council member, the city manager's decision may be reviewed by the full city council?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
One more question. Lieutenant Strange, will our officers who are actually wearing the body-worn cameras have the opportunity to review their camera footage before or in congruence with writing their reports for the purposes of assistance?
They will.
Great, thank you.
And their supervisors
Yes.
can review any of the footage? I mean, this is one of the battleground issues, is officers reviewing it at the point of report, right? So the civil rights organizations across the country think that that's awful, and the police organizations think that that's essential. So we should call that out. I mean, that is a real, I'm supportive of this approach, but we should not, that's not one of the, where there's universal notions about what best practices is. But on the supervisor piece, I know there's some debate in many cities around whether it's appropriate for supervisors to be able to just review one of their supervised officers' footage for whatever, without some reasonable suspicion or cause or whatever, and that it creates like for anybody doing their regular job, suddenly to be recorded, doing that job all the time, and the supervisor just wants to look at the tapes for purposes of determining whether, your uniform's clean or whatever. It's whether that's an appropriate use of the footage. And I don't know if that's addressed in the department's policy or whether that belongs here, because this is really about public release. But I'm curious where we're headed on that issue.
It is addressed in the department policy, and we've recently completed the process with the West Sacramento Police Officers Association through meet and confer, and have arrived at something that they both agree with and that we are comfortable with, that still offers us that reasonable accountability piece for our supervisors to monitor that which is defined in that policy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item, I think, 14 is consideration of second reading and adoption of ordinance 17-1, amending municipal code section 10.04.060A and chapter 10.24 concerning parking, and adding chapter 10.26 concerning parking meters. We also have a minor correction memo from the city manager at the desk on this item as well. So we actually didn't, I don't think a council member had a question. We did have a request for public comment on this issue. So,
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Doherty. And so we did have one request for comment on this. That's by Bill Chismar from Fulcrum Property.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Bill Chismar. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Fulcrum. We're affiliates of, we're the development affiliates of the Friedman family and owners of a large portion of the property in the Bridge District. And I wanted to comment on item 14, which is the sort of the parking meter program in general, and the implementation, as well as the permit program that existed in the Bridge District for parking. We're generally supportive of the parking meter program that's being proposed, but we have significant concerns about eliminating the residential permit program completely, and are concerned about the implementation measures that we really haven't had the opportunity, working with city staff and leadership, to vet some of the issues there that we think are going to come up, and would prefer that we had some time to not rush through this. A little background, on the, in the Bridge District in general, we've had this constant sort of Jekyll and Hyde battle with the city and leadership on urban density as well, sort of against suburban quality of life standards. The city has been very firm throughout the whole development process of the specific plan, which we worked collaboratively for many years on, of wanting density, an urban environment in the Bridge District. We have, through that whole time, been very concerned about the feasibility of projects. So, to agree to all the sort of standards of densities and yet then not be able to make things pencil has really been where we've kind of drawn our line and tried to work. And clearly, I think the city understands that. You guys have developed, or developing the affordable projects in the district. You know what things cost. You know how difficult it is to make things pencil. So, a lot of that collaborative effort really ended up being memorialized in our development agreements. We agreed to a lot of the goals of the city in terms of trying to have density, including penalties to the extent density wasn't provided. At the same time, then, we agreed from our standpoint to require the city to adopt urban standards, really recognize that there's going to be congestion, there's going to be more traffic, there's going to be more noise, and one of the principal elements of that really was parking. And if anything was unresolved at the end of all of these specific plan work, it was drilling down on that overall parking program. But within our development agreement, we negotiated for and argued for that we could not have zero lot lines and structure parking for the entire projects. That really, if we wanted to have density, we wanted to have more units, that we had to utilize street parking as part of, meeting the obligations or meeting the requirements for these buildings. And we negotiated for basically a 20% of our space could be provided for with street parking. We also, as part of that.
I need to ask you to wrap up.
Yes, we also argued.
For real, though, we apply the same standard to everyone that comes to speak?
Okay. Well, my goal then would be encourage the city actually to work with the property owners on this collaboratively, work with maintaining the permit program, working through the issues on the permit, the parking meter process, and we can go into all the issues associated with that with staff at that time.
Okay, thank you. All right. I would just say on this topic, I also spoke to Mr. Friedman today. That's not my recollection of how this project came about. This was a joint vision I know I just gave a speech last week about the incredible vision of Mr. Friedman and Fulcrum in what they were trying to create, which was at least as ambitious and audacious as what we were trying to create. So I don't recall the battles over whether or not we were going to achieve urban development or not. What I do recall is that we approved in the development standards at the request of Fulcrum a significant reduction in our parking requirements. And that was based on the economics, also based on the information that was provided to us around changes in parking patterns and guess what, folks? Millennials don't want cars, and they're biking, and there's all these other things happening. So in addition to it making economic sense for the projects to pencil, its parking is not necessary for folks living in this kind of an environment. And here's the research, here's the examples, here's what Sacramento has done and others as well. So we did that, and it hasn't worked out that way. Right? The amount of parking has been pretty severe. I live there. Verna lives there. There's several of us there. There's a lot of parking in that district. Folks aren't parking at the urban levels that were forecast when that happened. We all participated in that decision together, and so we're all grappling with how to deal with it today, because as we know from Burgers and Brew and what's happening in the Washington district, the kinds of retail and amenities and park and barn experiences that we're create significant parking demand. I think originally we thought, well, Burgers and Brew will need a block of parking plus the parking lot, and we're going to need 2, 3, 4, 5 times that much. In the neighborhood, on the street. Street parking is for the purpose of the public. It's part of the public realm. It's for visitors, it's for guests, it's for other residents in the community to be able to go and enjoy the amenities in which they have invested. The Riverwalk, Garden Park, and other parts of the city. It's principally for them, not for residential parking. And so if we don't accommodate that now, then a Burgers and Brew that moves into the Bridge District or into the barn is not going to have sufficient parking, and residents of our city and visitors will not have access to those things. And guests of people who are living in the Bridge District cannot park there. And we're seeing that in other neighborhoods that we built as well. So these are the trade-offs, and they are challenges that residents have to grapple with, that the developer has to grapple with. And in this case, I think it's principally an issue around leasing at Habitat, and that we're dealing with. And we're all having to do something. And in fact, the council has invested a significant amount of resources in trying to help to solve this problem, principally with the construction of the new parking lot at the Weyerhaeuser site. So delivering more parking than all the other folks put together through the Weyerhaeuser site, through the city's own resources, diverting resources in the Bridge District to support that. So we've definitely put our money in play and spent money that we did not anticipate spending on the Weyerhaeuser lot. That money was to be for a parking structure, and it will someday be that. But it isn't as though we have not done our financial part in order for this to work. So I think the issues deserve to be examined again, but I don't think putting off the ordinance is the answer to that in any way. It's the city thing. We'll have the authority to make adjustments as we go forward, but I want to set that conversation appropriately, as to not as though the city has caused this problem and any one of the parties has suddenly been put upon. This has been a challenge that's been created by everyone in some way or another, and including the folks that live there. And we all have something. We all have to give in order for this to proceed, and that includes the Habitat folks. I understand that the Weyerhaeuser lot has capacity for Habitat, but that's one of the reasons why the council approved doing it, and that there's some concern about whether folks would be willing to walk from Habitat to Weyerhaeuser. They currently do. They currently walk quite a ways for parking, because there's not anywhere near enough parking around Garden Park to support Habitat and Rivermark. So the walking patterns are already often 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks within that small area. So I don't think, in terms of this item, this is the right policy framework. We'll have plenty of opportunities to continue iterative solutions in partnership with the developer, who I know has worked very closely on every dimension of this with Public Works and parking, and directly with the city manager over the last year. So this is not a surprise to any of the landowners that we're moving in this direction. And when the neighborhood was first opened, we met with Rivermark, with Habitat, and every resident in the Park Moderns got notification that, in some cases directly from me, that there wasn't going to be long-term permanent parking, that wasn't part of the part, and don't have 5 cars for a 2-person unit. That's just not going to be viable. And so that day is coming, and that's a sign of success in the Bridge District, not of a challenge. So I still support moving forward with this item, and continue the long work that we have been doing to try to figure out iterative solutions with the project and with the residents and with others. So, Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, I just, in light of the testimony, I wonder if there's not a real, I know we don't like to kick the can on these types of ordinances, but is there a real urgency to do this tonight. I mean, it sounds like there hasn't been a dialogue with city staff and maybe some potential refinements to this that may work out.
Well, so I think there's been a lot of dialogue with city staff about this over the last year, but also this ordinance doesn't have anything to do with that. This ordinance is the framework for the parking meters that we're about to buy
Right.
on the same item. So even if this ordinance were not to pass, by prior direction of the council, those permit areas already go away. They just would be replaced by nothing except for 90-minute parking.
Right.
So in some sense, this ordinance, which would provide for, would create the framework for overnight parking, for example, which doesn't exist today, is essential in order to have any hope of creating some of these iterative solutions. But not doing the ordinance doesn't solve any of the problems that were raised in the testimony, and it makes our investment in the parking meters themselves that we're about to prove
Yeah,
useless.
I agree.
All right, anything else on the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion with the modification that we made to,
Sorry, Mr. Did you already call up? I thought you had asked for 18. Did you?
oh, you're right, I did. Thank you so much. Item 18 is request for authority for council support positions on
Sorry, John.
AB1, SB1, and Senate Bill 5 relating to transportation and parks funding, respectively. I did. Did you have something also, Mr.
No,
Ledesma?
I did not.
Okay, so on this item, these are the SB1 and AB1 are the two omnibus transportation proposals that at least the Democrats in both houses have put forward to fund transportation, which is a big priority for us. One I want to flag is, so these are not, at the moment, the battle lines that have been drawn on this in the Capitol are between the building community and the building trades community and many cities on one end, and on the other end is the environmental groups, the social justice groups, and others. And what the fight is mainly about, and we have a dog on both sides, is about funding the existing system versus funding the existing system and its deficiencies under the existing formulas, and funding what our transportation system is supposed to look like. So that fight's largely about how much is going into transit and into non-vehicular options and that sort of thing. One spin-off of that, though, is that this legislation, it generates a lot of money and then allocates it in a way that's not advantageous to us. And so I want to flag this because we ought to be, and we have the ability to have some influence in the Capitol on this. So I'm a little reticent to just jump on board. Yes, we love these bills as they are. I think, yes, I love them conceptually, but particularly when you get beyond, let me take that back, actually. So even on road rehabilitation, the allocations would be made based on, if I remember correctly, based on population for cities and population and road miles for counties, if I remember correctly. So for what is called the Road Rehabilitation and Recovery Fund, although that fund is going to be used to pay for a whole bunch of stuff that's not road rehabilitation and recovery. So we're a major goods movement city, right? So when you allocate money for road rehabilitation based solely on population, you allocate more money to Davis than you do to us. And I'm just picking Davis because they're our closest neighbor. That's roughly our size, but they're bigger than that. So you allocate more money to Davis for road rehabilitation, even though the usage and the demand on the roads is much more severe here because we have so many more trucks. So that formula is not to our advantage, and it's not to our advantage in a pretty profound way, just on the rehab side. On the non-rehab stuff, so as these bills proceed, and they are undoubtedly going to end up covering more issues than just rehabilitation, that's when it becomes a real problem. Because what we determined at the regional scale here was that, okay, West Sacramento has agreed that its vision for itself means that it's going to grow twice or three times as fast as Davis and Woodland. And the regional commitment was, and therefore, most of the transportation funding that comes to the region, that goes to Yolo County, will go to West Sacramento because it has to accommodate all this additional growth. So the bridges, the streetcars, the trails, everything else that has to happen in order for that growth to happen, we will spend more money in West Sacramento than we will in those other areas. When you revert instead to a formula that's just based on how many people do you currently have, the disconnect between the system of transportation that we're supposed to be building and where the resources are going becomes really profound. So and we need to engage that issue. Our local senator and assembly members are not co-authors of this legislation yet, and we have a moment, I think, maybe because of the battle that's happening between the environmental folks and the traditional transportation community folks, to try to influence that. And so I'm not suggesting that we take oppose unless amended or some really aggressive policy in that space, but I do think we need to play a role to try to tune those formulas in ways that are more consistent with the state's policies, which happen to also be supportive of our own regional and local policies here in West Sacramento, that will have the dollars flow to where they're the most needed and where they're the most justified. In our case, because of trucking and the goods movement system, and because we have agreed to grow faster than most other places in the region, and the transportation money has to follow. So I'm supportive of taking a support position, but I'm not supportive of the letters yet. I think we need to have a more nuanced approach to this that seeks to influence the shape of the legislation as we're proceeding. So I'd like to vote yes on this, and then let's work on the way that we're going to convey that emphasizes these key points, and then we, with our advocate in the Capitol, that we start to convey this issue and start to try to build the necessary coalitions at the key moments where the battle between the enviros and the transportation lobby might create an opening for us.
Okay.
Seeing nodding heads, so I'm just
Yes.
take that as okay. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So with that, we have the consent agenda with the amendments that the city attorney described for item 9.
Move the consent.
Gets moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
And your changes for 18.
Yes, and the changes to 18 as well. Yes, thank you. And seconded by Ms. Orozco. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That'll bring us then to item 20, which is consideration of Resolution 17-9, authorizing the mayor to execute agreements with the State Board of Equalization for implementation of a local transactions and use tax.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a procedural requirement with the State Board of Equalization to implement the local transactions and use tax. This agreement basically provides BOE to perform all the functions and administration of the Measure E that was passed on November 8, 2016. With that said, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Sandy?
I just have a clarification. I noticed in the resolution, in section 3, it says that Muni Services, is that?
This is city sales tax consultant.
Okay.
Yes.
I hadn't seen a reference to them any other place, so I wanted to make sure they were the right people or organizations. Thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, there's a motion on item 20.
Move the recommended action.
I'll second.
It's moved by Mr. Ledesma, seconded by Ms. Sandine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 21 is consideration and award of contract with various vendors for the acquisition of a police camera system and adoption of Resolution 17-2, declaring the city's intent to reimburse itself from tax-exempt financing for certain expenditures made or to be made in connection with the acquisition, construction, and equipping of certain capital improvements. Mr. Blumberg?
Yep. Since this item was before you last November 16th, I don't have a presentation. Just typically, these equipment leases would be on the consent agenda, but anytime you enter into long-term debt and a 5-year financing is long-term, government code requires that it be on the regular agenda. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise,
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second it.
All right, seeing no further discussion, it's been moved by Mr. Ledesma and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 22 is presentation and discussion on the Water Master Plan update and capital improvement projects funded by the proposed water rate. Mr. Goodwin.
Good evening, council members. My name is Derek Goodwin, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Water Master Plan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you, the microphone also, if you use that button to your right, it'll come a little closer to you, so folks at home, home can hear you.
Tonight, we're going to try to talk a little bit about the Water Master Plan and how it correlates to the CIP projects and the rate that was approved to move forward in December. So The last time we was here in December, council asked us if we would go through and do a couple more presentations in relationships to the EU Commission as well. So Monday, we presented to the EU Commission, and we had a great discussion and communication. There was some great comments that came back, and I'll just touch on a couple of them. One of them, they wanted to know how did our rates compare to the rest of the region's rates, and we had a little discussion on that. And actually, when our rates are passed under this current proposal, it'll still be the second lowest in the region. Another comment that came up, it wanted to know, the commission wanted to know whether or not there would be education components included in the water master plan. The water master plan does not include education components, but staff is working with environmental staff on the water conservation education components, and that'll be brought forward later. And the commission also asked, could we present to the commission some of these conservation measures or educational measures on how the residents could save money or water. Another topic that was interesting is that, as you'll see later, is that we have one unique system, but we also have a barrier from the north and south. The barrier is the barge canal, and we have an inline booster system that pumps the water from north to south. So an interesting question came up through there is what's our integrity of the inline boosters? The inline booster pump station is in good shape. It's brand new, and we have no projects in line to upgrade or facilitate additional funding towards it, or CIP projects towards it. Tonight, I have Chris Cleveland here. He was with me a couple other times to present to council, and he's going to kind of correlate the CIP projects to the rate funded being proposed.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Good to see you again. As Derek said, we are back to present a little bit additional information on the proposed CIP. Tonight is part one of two that we are prepared to come and in front of council, as well as Monday's meeting with the EU Commission and a future EU Commission. This first brief presentation is to cover the existing system, and the second presentation will be to cover those projects that will support the general plan and the growth projections in the water master plan. Will you be controlling our slides? Thank you.
Would you like to?
Sure.
Sorry.
So the goal of the Water Master Plan is really to determine the system design of your water system. It consists of two components, the supply side, your intake and water treatment plant, as well as a distribution system that carries the water throughout the city. The plan defines the goals and the criteria that establish the system operation and the performance of that water system. We always want to make sure that you are meeting your federal, state, and local water regulations. On the water side, of course, that's maintaining enough quantity of water in the areas it needs to be, but also equally or more important even is the quality of water, providing safe, healthy water for your customers, your residents, and your industry as well to use. And we also looked at this time at your fire flow criteria and made some small adjustments there to be more in line with current thinking for fire suppression, did that in line with the fire department. Whoops. We looked at a number of different areas throughout the water system. We looked at the distribution system capacity. We looked at the age of the water mains, the condition of the water mains in general. We didn't go dig up water mains throughout the city, but we have a lot of good data on the type of mains, the type of soil, and the age of the mains as to when they might fail. We looked at the water meter program and finishing up installation of residential water meters. We also looked at tank and pump station condition and capacity as it would meet the current needs and the future needs of the city. And we also looked at your largest asset in the water distribution system, which is your water treatment plant, and did a significant condition assessment of that facility. That facility provides all of the drinking water to the city, and it's located in the north part of the city. So if we start very quickly at the water treatment plant, we looked at all the different process areas throughout the plant, and we gave each asset in each of those areas a criteria of 1 to 5 based on its condition and its remaining useful life. This is a summary table that just shows all those different areas, all those different assets, and at the bottom you can kind of see the distribution of the condition of each of those assets. We use this then to generate projects that address those that are in the higher scoring categories of 5 and 4 that need addressing sooner. The ones farther down the road, we can address more long-term. Once the water leaves the water treatment plant, it goes into your distribution system. We did a very significant upgrade in the hydraulic model that the city uses. In 2005, which was the last water master plan that you did, we used what's called a skeletonized model. In other words, it just had the major elements of the water distribution system in it. The computing power in 2005 was much less than what we have today. You also didn't have a functioning GIS system within the Department of Public Works. This new system, we did a full evaluation of a new platform to use that's the high-tech platform that allows every single pipe and every single element to be imported. It also ties directly into the city's GIS system. So there's a linkage there, so as the GIS system gets updated, we can import those new data, new developments, real-time into the hydraulic model and run models for any proposed developments, see those impacts, and we've actually already been doing that and supporting the city over the last year or so. We look at capacity of the water distribution system, both for normal demands, meeting max day demands in the summer, as well as peak hour demands, things like 7 o'clock in the morning when people are taking a shower. We also look at it for fire flow. So this is just an example of one of the outputs from the model. We did a full calibration and fire flow testing throughout the city to make sure it's an accurate model first. Then we run a number of different scenarios, both for your current system and your future projected system, which we'll talk about at the next council meeting. The red dots here identify areas where we found fire flow deficiencies at different hydrant locations. There's about 106 of those that we identified throughout the city. That's pretty common, especially in the northern part of your city where you have older water mains that weren't sized for fire flow. And the goal here is then to address those through projects where mostly we upsize them from 4-inch and 6-inch mains that were mainly just for residential supply to fire flow 8-inch and above. You also have tanks and pump stations throughout the city. If we break this area, as Derek mentioned, kind of into the northern half and southern half of the city, in the second column it says available storage. You have 17 million gallons of available storage in the north, a little over 6.5 in the south. We then look at your required storage for your existing system only, not projecting into the future. We break that into 3 categories: your operational storage, your fire supply storage, and emergency storage. And if we compare those needs to what you currently have, we have a surplus of storage in the north of a little over 3 million gallons and a slight deficit in the south. But overall, throughout the city, you have a slight surplus in overall storage. As Derek mentioned, you have a pretty unique situation with the Deepwater Channel with only one connection across it at this point. There's a second one that's being constructed and in design, and the final portion of that that'll provide some resiliency of a second connection in case there's a problem with that one connection. Ideally, we'd like to also provide resiliency by having adequate storage in the south. And so the master plan develops some additional storage in the south to get rid of that deficit down at that location. We did take a look at smart infrastructure initiative integration with the water master plan. I talked briefly about the new hydraulic model and that platform being really a really brand new technology that we've implemented here. It really allowed us to drill down into a much more detailed level and try and minimize the large scale projects we had to do at the macro scale and really focus in on smaller projects that addressed specific needs within the street level or even residential level or single hydrant level. So that allowed us to reduce the cost of those projects significantly. Another infrastructure initiative that's ongoing is the smart meter program. As the residential water meters are being implemented and completed with that program, the city is installing smart meters that allow not just monthly bills to come in, but it can eventually provide even hourly data of usage, which provides a tool for the residents to go and look at their water usage, see where they're using water compared to where they think they're using water, and use that to reduce their water usage and therefore their cost of the water as they move into a metered rate. The city is also going back and retrofitting older meters that have been in for a while with this new technology and hardware, and a new software platform is being looked at to manage all of this new data. Once we developed all the needs, we developed a capital improvement program to address existing areas that were identified, and we categorized those into 4 areas. Phase 1 were the highest priority projects, and those are in the first 5 years, and then we moved down into 2nd, 3rd, and 4th phases through the planning period of 2035. The idea being here that each time you go and redo your master plan and update it, you get a chance to look at each of the projects in these categories and decide whether they need to move up in priority or can move down in priority based on condition assessment and other of the analysis tools that we use. So over the 20-year planning horizon, if we break our capital improvement program into two areas, the water distribution system and the water treatment plant, it totals about $130 million over that 20-year period. If we break that into kind of existing system, O&M and future and development, you can see the split there between the two. Tonight, we're really going to only cover that second column of capital costs and utility rate funded. We'll come back and cover the developer-funded projects at a later date. So the rates that you looked at and approved the 218 process for at the end of last year covered a 5-year portion, that Phase 1 CIP. And this is, of all those analyses that we did, these are the types of projects that were identified. There's several hundred projects that are in the list in the Water Master Plan itself. So these are just the categories. We have fire flow improvements, old water mains, a new courtyard that both water and sewer and potentially other funds are all supporting. Capacity improvements, the water meter program, tank and pump station rehab. Some of that is just coating and normal maintenance. There's some other projects down the road for seismic improvements there. And then the water treatment plant related projects. The rate that you approved the 218 process for had $22 million identified towards the Water Master Plan projects in Phase 1. We listed emergency projects of a little under $2.5 million within that $22 million. While we'd like to think we have a crystal ball to identify every single project you're going to need to do in the next 5 years, we know we can't get there. And so we've identified that as an emergency fund. We have currently unfunded projects with the $22 million of about $6 million. If we don't need to use those emergency project funds for those projects, we can move some of those up into the first 5 years. That's the end of the slides. Happy to answer any questions.
Representative Johannesson.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just a quick question. On some of the technology that's going to be incorporated into this, is there a thought on having that data publicly available on usage and exposing the collected data as part of our open data program here?
Sorry. I would say that we haven't had a discussion about the use of the data for public use. The discussion has been so far on city use to determine water loss. Typically, cities have around 10% of non-revenue water. That's leakages that occur throughout the distribution system. Once you become fully metered, and we can look at the data around the city, we can try and target areas where non-revenue water loss is occurring and address those for the city use. And then we also talked about it from residents' use. But there hasn't been any discussion that I've been involved in anyway about making that publicly available.
Okay.
We have adopted an open data policy, so it's probably time to start doing that. The city manager's office has been curating, so, but I think it's exactly right. I mean, on the smart infrastructure piece, I mean, the smart water infrastructure has to be much more than just the meters. I mean, and more than just, you know, whatever today's, I mean, my car's got, you know, has something that like 2 years model ago didn't have. It doesn't make it a smart car. It's using today's technology, but we've always done that. I mean, the predictive analytics, the open data, particularly the use of data outside of the water plant, are some characteristics of a more expansive smart infrastructure agenda than simply the meters and leaky pipes, which is not trivial. But I just want to emphasize, because, you know, when we ask infrastructure engineers to come back with a different approach around infrastructure, we get engineering solutions back again. And I get it, and we need to, and I'm supportive of these. But I think the smart infrastructure piece that we have prioritized, I'm hoping we will get proposals from water and from sewer and from the utilities for the, you know, essentially the smart technology venture pot that we've set up in Measure E for really innovative things that will have benefits that don't accrue just inside the plant, but that have the potential to create other value in addition to supporting improved efficiency of the plant. So to me, the Mayor Pro Tem's question is right on point as one element of the build out of what that smart infrastructure strategy ought to look like. I mean, we don't know. I mean, like most of the smart city stuff that we've begun to stick our toe into, we're still figuring it out too. But I do know that it's more. The answer can't just be that we're doing smart meters. like everyone else on the planet that's doing meters at this point, so.
Sure.
Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you, and I appreciate the update and the review of the CIP project. You brought up early on, I'm not sure if you answered the question, or at least gave us the answer, but did an assessment of our largest asset, which is the water treatment plant. So I understand, trying to translate all you've given us to what we tell our constituents about the investment we're making in our infrastructure. Because generally speaking, I think our residents feel the water quality of our water quality is great. We understand we have parts of the city that are older than the others, and I think what you're saying is most of that infrastructure for fire flow and everything else, we're putting as a priority. But the water treatment plant, you said you were going to do an assessment on it, and I don't know what the answer was to that in its current state, because it's not, I don't think any part of it is part of the CIP plan. Is that a true statement?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, there are CIP projects within the Water Master Plan that address the water treatment plant and the assessment that we did.
So what, the overall assessment of our treatment plant, though, is it, I mean, you gave it a 1 through 5 rating of, just parts of it are in the 5 stage, or is that generally?
Yeah, so the original plant, I believe, was built in the 80s, and then it went through a significant rehab and expansion around 2004. So it's relatively still new, a good portion of it. Some of the older components are more structural in nature rather than mechanical. Structures, concrete, and things tend to last longer. The newer things are much more mechanically intensive. They have shorter lives, say 20 years. So if we go from 2004 to 2017, we're about 13 years into, say, many mechanical pieces of equipment that are 20 years lifetime anticipation. So we have some projects there that are currently on the CIP in the short term. We have a number more that are in phases 2, 3, and 4 to continue to maintain the high quality and the capacity that you have at that treatment plant.
I think most people, it was important for you to understand, because most people think about our water system as it's a new plant, right? Because it's got a lot of upgrades in the last 10, 15 years, but it isn't, to your point. So, okay, I appreciate that. I just want to get a better sense of that. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Andine?
Thank you for the presentation. I feel like after this weekend and dealing with the Orville Dam situation that we all went through for a couple days, trying to figure out who made a decision, right or wrong, I think it's so timely that we're talking about dealing with our infrastructure, even though they're tied to higher rates for residents. But I think people expect that we're going to be figuring out the best way we can to take care of them and to take care of things that they need every day. So I think all these projects completely make sense. I have to figure out how I would explain to someone, and I know we need to figure out funding for the courtyard. I need to figure out how to explain, like, how does this piece relate to that? Is there some formula? Because I know it also comes up in our next item too. Is there some piece of this where we could say this part of the water, folks who do water work in public works, that this part of it is what would be needed for the courtyard? So that'd be my only question.
Yeah, so the 218 process that was approved by council included dollars for the courtyard, both in water and sewer. There may be other costs or money from other pots, I'm not exactly sure. I think the messaging and the understanding to residents is it's not just pieces of equipment that are part of the system, it's people,
Everything.
it's staff, it's trucks, it's maintenance equipment to clean out the storm drains, it's all of these things that that if you don't look around carefully, you wouldn't notice until something major happens. But, we're most known for, you don't see us unless there's a problem, right? I mean, the utilities are there, and you hope you don't have to see us very much if we do our job correctly.
I think that's sufficient. That was just one I was struggling with. I recall when it came to us, and I know we have to figure out how to fund it. So
Right.
To me, it has to be as direct line as I can, explaining it to folks who are paying more. Thanks.
I had a couple of questions, but I first wanted to, I never watch commission meetings because these meetings are enough for me, but I did because of the conversation that we had on this item in December. And the major surgery that we did with the Environment and Utilities Commission, did watch that commission meeting or the tape of it earlier in the week, and it was very impressive, the level of the conversation, of the questioning and the analysis that was happening in that commission meeting, I think was exactly what we had hoped to achieve when we created that commission just over 2 years ago, or maybe now 4. So really appreciate the commissioners and also the staff and the consultant for engaging them in a way that I think is starting to bring the appropriate level of oversight and questions and policy relevance and context to the work. The question I have on sort of a couple of the key areas. I'm curious about the sensitivity analysis on them. So the fire flow one, if you spend enough time in land use planning, you learn to respect and not unquestionably accept the recommendations of the fire department. You can't turn over land use planning to fire and say, hey, what do you want? How big should a cul-de-sac be for turning around, or how big should the street be? You'll get an answer back, but it's usually a number where it's a limit approaching infinity, because you never know how much bigger next year's model of the truck could be long. The one that we really have our eye on that only exists right now in Zurich is an amazing truck, but it extends for 6 blocks. So we'd love to have that. And it's not a fire issue, that's just true in all departments. So if you just say, oh, we trust your judgment completely, and this in some sense gets to what the issues at Oroville, when we trust the subject matter experts in one area completely, we run the risk of overspending essentially in that space, and it's not a trivial part of this overall budget. It's one of the largest elements is fire flow. So I'm curious, is the sensitivity of what you got back from fire. It could be that it's so gross that you're talking about moving from 4-inch pipes to 8-inch pipes, and that's true across a wide range of what if you took the fire department's recommendations and cut it by 15% or increased it by 15%, you still have to go to 8 inches, or maybe the recommendation was 8 inches. But I'm just curious on that particular element, and then one other, what the assessment of the sensitivity around the recommendations that you were getting from fire.
Sure. The change we made was actually to lower the fire flow. The only change we made was to lower a target fire flow for a certain type of industrial areas. The residential areas and hydrant usage did not change, and it continues to be in line with basically the national kind of standard for residential hydrant use, the number of hydrants you may use in a residential fire, the locations of them, those types of things. So we try and bring a broader perspective than each fire department has when they just kind of look at their city, because we do a number of these studies and try and say, here are what we're seeing across these types of projects. You may want to consider these, you may not want to consider them, but they're there for your education. We didn't raise not a single design criteria for fire flow.
But to follow up on that, so if you're looking at sort of best practice or what the kind of the national standard is, which is, I'm assuming, not a absolute universal number that's been laid out in the Constitution, but there's some range.
Yes.
And maybe you put us in the middle of that range. In terms of the cost, if you'd taken us to the lower 3 deciles of that range, would that have, does that have any cost implications at all, and if so, would there be significant?
Yeah, in general, the amount of water needed to fight a fire is pretty well defined within a pretty narrow band per hydrant. And so there is no 4-inch line that could ever provide enough fire flow, no matter how low you kind of went within reason of a fire flow to do that. And those are the types of projects that we're really going in and replacing, and everyone across the country at this point is in a process of replacing all the 4-inch lines that were put in. So there's not a lot of sensitivity. You can lower the number, but it really doesn't change the hydraulics of a lot of water trying to get through a really small straw.
Because the next jump from 4 is to 8 inches.
You can go to 6.
Right, but there's no like 7¼ inch pipes. So
There's
that's
not.
this is what I'm getting to, that sensitivity.
Correct.
Right. So it doesn't really matter sensitivity around a certain range, because getting from 6 to 8 is 6 to 8. Period. There's no intermediate choices to be made.
Right, and if you look at the cost of going from a 4-inch line to a 6-inch line versus a 4-inch line to an 8-inch line, most of the cost is not in the material.
Yeah.
It's in the labor. So you might as well put in a slightly larger for a very, very small amount of additional money to get that additional looping and reliability. It's very low sensitivity cost-wise there, too.
Okay, so then same question on the capacity side, the amount of the amount that you've allocated or that we assume we need for emergency and for the other various elements. Because capacity is also a significant part of the 19 million in phase one as well. How much of that, the assumptions on how much emergency is needed, beyond fire flow, and I think isn't that how you characterize emergency, as beyond fire flow and beyond?
Yeah, so capacity is kind of in two areas. Capacity is the capacity of the pipes to carry normal water that aren't fighting fires, and capacity is also in your storage. And there's not a lot of money in the storage of capacity. There's a slight deficit, which we're going to just make up the next time you do a developer-driven, growth-driven project. We'll just kind of build that capacity in there.
So the Southport deficit is to be covered in the future?
It'll be covered as part of another project.
Okay, it's not in the rate piece.
Well, it will be in the rate piece when that project hits, because it's an existing need, and so the developer impact fee wouldn't necessarily go towards that. I'm not a rate expert, so that's about as far as I can go in that discussion about how you break those up. I know Nitish is here, and he could certainly answer those types of questions. But we try and join up needs between impact and rate-funded projects to get a good economy of scale on projects. Again, we don't see it as a high-priority need because you have overall enough storage in the system. You have a second pipe going across the Deepwater Channel to provide resiliency of the storage to be able to go from the north to the south. So it's a need, but not a high-priority one. The capacity projects that I think you're talking about are really pipe capacity projects.
No, actually, that was the one.
That
was the principal one I was talking about. Was how much? So we assume a certain emergency level. Now we've never done it, so we don't actually know what our needs are. But we're making some assumptions about a couple of those categories about what the absolute need would be, and that's what generates. It's not a deficit in terms of our daily operations or peak usage. It's in the case of a catastrophic emergency of some kind. And so whether, how much emergency need you project drives whether you have a 1.4 million gallon per day deficit.
And the example I gave on Monday night was, Oroville Dam, if it goes at some point, and you have a huge rush of silt coming down the Sacramento River, and the water treatment plant can't treat that water for a period of time until that flush makes it by the intake, you're going to shut that treatment plant off for a period of hours or maybe even days. That's the use of that emergency storage.
Right, but my question is you have to decide whether we need, you said hours or days, but we have to make assumption. The assumption for that is do we want to have 3 days of emergency storage or 8 or 2 hours? That's a discretionary choice.
Yes.
For us to make as a city that comes with a cost.
Yes.
And particularly if it gets you to a point where, okay, now we have to build this extra Southport capacity, if we have to do a project because of that assumption about what emergency exists, that's a key policy question for us to be making, right? Because if the difference between 7 days of emergency and 8 days of emergency means a whole new project, then I might be okay with 7 days of emergency in order to do one of the other projects. So that, I hope as we proceed down this road that you'll be able to flag that sort of issue. That's exactly the kind of issue I think we've got to grapple with. That doesn't require deep knowledge of engineering, but does require a deep sense of, making really crappy choices on behalf that express the values and the priorities and the fiscal prudence of the city. So, any other questions or comments? All right. Great, thank you. This is presentation only. All right, next is item 23, which is presentation and discussion on the sewer master plan update and capital improvement projects funded by the proposed sewer rates.
Good evening, Council. As Derek presented, along with Chris, on the water master plan, we have a similar presentation on the sewer master plan. Again, we were here in December, and we received some comments from council. And tonight, we hope to be able to address some of those. Earlier this week, we did go present to the EU Commission, and a couple of comments received pertain to, the level of the CIP funding and the criteria we use to select the projects. With that, I'd like to introduce John Wells with West Shows again. He's going to go over the CIP in depth, and then I'll be here to help answer any questions.
All right, welcome.
Good evening, and thanks for your time tonight. I think when we presented before, we went over in a little bit more general terms what the sewer master plan is about, what we're trying to do in broad terms, and the overall CIP, some of the broader collection system findings. And tonight we'll just hone in directly on the CIP and on the projects that we're recommending as a result of that master plan. We just spoke before about getting the drinking water to the customers, and now we're going to talk about taking that drinking water back away for treatment. So we'll complete the loop here. The Sewer Capital Improvement Program encompasses projects from column A, and that's approximately $56 million of projects that include both those projects for the existing system that would be eligible for the utility rate study and projects that would come from developer impact fees later. A subset of that large group of projects is the $36 million that would be utility rate eligible, and these are our recommendations and our determination of which projects are utility rate eligible. And then column C on the right-hand side are the projects that are being recommended as priority projects and that would be funded under the existing 218 process that is going forward. So it's those subset of utility rate eligible projects that are currently being funded under the rates proposed in the current 218 process. And so with that, I wanted to go through each of these 7 categories and talk about which projects we are recommending at this time. The first one of these projects is a complete inspection and cleaning of the sewer gravity main, the collection system and the gravity mains. This is not a glamorous project. It's 5 years of cleaning and inspecting the entire system, but it comes directly out of the inspections that we did as part of the master plan. We selected certain areas of the city for inspection. These were determined to be both the areas that we thought might be the worst areas, given their age and what staff knew about them, but also a representative sampling of some of the different materials, ages, and things like that. And one of the things that came out of that is that the collection system is in basically good condition, but there needs to be more maintenance effort. There are maintenance issues which are hampering the capacity of that. And so that's why we were recommending further inspection of cleaning of the entire system in order to remediate some of that and put that extra effort in, and then also inspection to see where the next priorities are. And again, that's the entire system over 5 years as part of this recommendation.
Is there, on this map you have in front of you, is there a color coding we should be aware of, or that just?
Oh, excuse me. The map is broken down into 5 areas color coded, and the hotter colors are the highest priority areas. So we would be recommending that the cleaning and inspection start at the north of the city and move toward the south. And that reflects the age of the collection system in the north and some of the materials which are not as robust as the newer plastic collection system materials in the southern part of the city.
So green is a hotter color than purple, just?
I'm trying to figure that one out.
Is that right?
For tonight, we'll have to stipulate that it is. I don't know for sure. This is why I didn't go to art school or architecture school. Second group of projects which we are recommending as part of the priority projects would be backyard mains. These are collection system gravity mains which run not in the right-of-way but through private property and through easements. They posed maintenance challenges for city staff, and they also can stand in the way of purchase and redevelopment because no one wants to then purchase this land which has an easement through it and that buildings cannot be constructed over and things like that. So there were 2 projects that were identified that would be eligible for rate funding, and we're prioritizing the first project, which is shown in red there, for funding as part of this utility rate increase for $750,000. As we said, we did inspection across the collection system and the gravity mains, and although the system was in basically good condition, the inspections did find that there were some areas of deterioration, particularly older gravity mains in the northern part of the city, and those gravity mains that are made out of concrete, which does not resist sewer usage, as well as clay or plastic. So we identified a number of projects which were seen directly through our inspections. Those are listed here. We also, knowing that there's going to be a full inspection of the collection system that we're recommending in the next 5 years, we are putting in a placeholder for projects to be identified because we know that the inspection is going to turn up more projects, and we wanted to make sure that those are funded. However, that placeholder would not be funded as part of the existing rate increase. So there's 2 projects that have the priority to be funded tonight. 5,000 feet of line up in the C Street area in the northern part of the city, next to where the I Street Bridge is coming in, and then a couple of manholes in the southern part of the city, which are deteriorating rapidly. And we just want to communicate a little bit that those rehabilitation and repair strategies are not being made simply or by gut feel or in any sort of simple algorithm. We're introducing a model to the city for this that as was talked about for the water master plan, it ties in directly to the city's GIS. It allows all the inspection information that's done to be placed into this model. So after it's done, anyone from the city can go through and look and see exactly what was shown on particular pipelines as they were inspected. The model can also be programmed with things like what the traffic situation is, or are there new developments that are coming in this area, or is this pavement going to be torn up in the next 5 years, and so that would boost these to a higher level because we don't have to come in and rehabilitate pipelines right after the pavement has been rehabilitated. So all those things can go into this model, and then quantitative decisions can be made about where the dollar should be spent. And the fact that the I Street Bridge is coming in and there's going to be a lot of work in the northern part of the city where those gravity mains were in poor condition was one reason why that project would be prioritized over others in the city. As part of the recommended utility rate increase, the sewer master plan CIP contains $2 million for the corporation yard. It's exactly analogous to what was discussed for the water master plan. As I understand it, and I'd have to go back to confirm this, the allocations were made on a square footage basis that would be allocated to the different utilities. So I think there is a direct tie-in there. We just need to probably confirm that a little bit more closely. And then the final category of projects that come up with recommendations under the existing utility rate increase are the lift station rehabilitation and replacement projects. So as you know, where we can, we like to have wastewater flow by gravity to things, but occasionally things like hills, deep water channels, that kind of stuff get in the way, and we end up having to pump the wastewater. And so similarly to what we talked about for the gravity mains, we did an inspection, a physical inspection, and a hydraulic capacity inspection of all of the 14 pump stations and lift stations that are in the system. And we plot them out on a risk matrix like this that incorporates both the probability that you would have a problem with that element and the consequence should you have a problem with that element. And so we came up with a fairly long list of rehabilitation and repair that was needed and would be needed under existing conditions. And so you can see that there's a large list of projects here, and we're only recommending that one be funded for priority. And the reason for that is that the majority of the projects on there are on there because the pump stations and their physical capacity is just slightly mismatched for the system. They were originally designed when the wastewater treatment plant was in place, and their capacities were matched to that. As the wastewater treatment plant was taken out and the flow was then now routed to the interceptor which takes it for regional treatment, the pump stations don't match up quite as well. That doesn't mean that they're in danger of failing. That doesn't mean that they're in danger of not meeting their design criteria. It means that they run a little bit inefficiently. They could be more energy efficient, and they take a little bit more maintenance and a little bit more staff time to do. So these are real items that need to be addressed, but they're not critical items. The critical item is a single lift station, which we're recommending for replacement because it was identified in poor condition, and actually staff identified it as an area that they don't like to go into, and that it was discouraging regular maintenance activities because of the condition of the lift station and the entry they had to make into that. So that item was prioritized. And so finally, the ongoing activities for this effort are the future growth CIP and next month to come back to the EU Commission and back to you guys with more description of the projects which are developer impact fee funded. to tie both of these and your recommendations and any comments that you have on this into the ongoing financial plan. And then all of this that we're doing, including the master plan, is being incorporated into the sewer system management plan, which is the regulatory document required of all collection systems by the state of California, and that needs to reflect what's being done here on the master plan, as well as all the ongoing maintenance activities in the collection system. And by state law, that sewer system management plan will have to come before you guys, because we're doing what is considered to be a significant update to that. So you'll be seeing that at a later time. And with that, that's the end of the presentation, but I'll certainly answer any questions.
The wastewater treatment, the old plant decommissioning, that's not proposed for funding here, and it's a pretty significant item, right, at almost $14 million. What's the, well, actually, first question is, when we did the Sacramento Regional Sanitation District deal, I mean, I was on council, but this was a long time ago. I thought we incorporated essentially all the costs associated with that transition, including decommissioning of the plant. Did we not include that, or did we divert those funds to some other purpose? Because we got a check essentially from Sac Regional for a variety of things, which including the Sycamore, some of the Sycamore Trail work that and other stuff. But I don't recall whether we got any resources for the decommissioning at all.
I am not aware of the history of that, but I will try to address some of what I do know. We have deactivated the plant, but we have not removed all the infrastructure that's built in there. So at this point, the equipment and all the metal underworking is probably considered hazardous materials.
Mm-hmm. And is it not proposed to be? So it's not in the CIP proposal. Is it proposed to be funded at any stage during the overall financing plan?
We're going to come back to you for direction in the impact fee analysis. That column that we showed there, that's eligible for utility rate funding, that's not set in stone. Depending on the direction we get on the impact fee from you on the impact fee analysis, I think that's a policy question. So if you give us some guidance that says, some of the full decommissioning of the, former wastewater treatment plant should be funded by utility rates, and another portion should be funded by impact fees, then we would have to make that adjustment.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but the conundrum is, it's not as though we're going to be able to fund the decommissioning simply by a development project. It would take a huge amount of value being added to the Pioneer Bluffs area for it be possible to extract an extra $14 million in order to redevelop that property by us or by someone else. So it seems unimaginable that there wouldn't have to be some contribution from the enterprise that made it $14 million worth of deficit to that property. So, but that's also a very large amount of money even for the sewer fund. So that issue, I don't know to what extent economic development and community development are involved in this dimension of it, but that question of, how are we going to deal with the wastewater treatment plant given that large amount of money hanging over it, and it seems likely that everybody's going to, we're going to have to find a bunch of ways to be able to cover $14 million, not any single source, but I think a zero contribution, from the sewer fund is probably not, that doesn't like intuitively sound appropriate to me, given that if it were a private operator that had left hazardous materials on the site, that we would require them to remove them before we acquired it. So the other question I was just processing, it's actually on both, I don't know if the water folks are still here, but Denix is, so he can handle it anyway. We approved in the workshop, we greenlighted initiating the 218 process, but we haven't settled on a final 218 dollar figure, have we? Right. So, okay, I didn't think so. So, you're working on one as a working assumption, but we didn't. That number is it's still subject to change, isn't it? The rate numbers?
No, we actually, as I understand, we got the directions to move forward with the 218 process with the caveat that council will approve the 5-year rate plan, but each year before the new rate is implemented, will be in front of council.
Okay.
So that's what we
Okay,
decided.
okay, so, good, that's great. Same implication, though, which is that in both presentations to us, and I think to the commission as well, it's sort of, it's taken for granted. Here's the funding that we have because of the rate changes over the 5-year period. And I think what council said in December was, hey, we're not sure about that. We want to look more at the master plan. We want to understand this better before. We're ready to go. Let's do the initiation, as you say, on the first year, but we're not making a commitment yet on years 2 through 5. And so it will be important for both, for our review to be able to see what's on the edge. Right, where that line is. So you've told us, and this is the most extensive presentation I think we've had on these topics ever. So you've told us which projects you would propose to fund given that set of rates over the next 5 years. For us to make the policy call ultimately, then we need to know, okay, if we were to take those rates down a little bit, what's the first project that would fall off on this list, and what's the first, and then what's the one after that, and what's the one after that, what's the one after that, and same thing on the water plant, so that we understand as we're making rate decisions what the trade-offs are, and for real, what's the project like? Not a Washington Monument strategy where like you're putting the cutest one with all the babies and the bunnies up on the front. Oh, that's the one that's going to go if you don't approve the rates. No, I mean for real. If we absolutely would not approve the rates, what would you cut next? I think it's important for us to know that so that we can both review and concur with that choice, but then also make the rate decisions on that basis. Ms. Orozco?
No, my sensitivity is obviously with the ratepayers who are going to have to absorb this increase, and we discussed that in our December meeting. There are lots of folks that I spoke with in the last several months who have difficulty even affording a bus trip from one end of town to the other. And in looking at this, I want to make sure that what we're paying for is what we absolutely need. I mean, there are lots of wants, and of course, I want my city to have the most top-notch infrastructure, and an ideal situation would include all of these items and all of these enhancements and projects. However, in walking back through my neighborhood and meeting an elderly woman who's on a fixed income, or somebody who lives in a mobile home park who is very price sensitive and having to sell this information, I want to make sure that we're absolutely pinpointing what exactly we need, so that way we're meeting the needs of our city, but at the same time balancing the needs of our citizens to be able to afford their monthly costs every month.
Megan?
No, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I agree, because I think our discussion in December was around how do we make these discussions around CIP issues more dynamic for us? Typically, we have to depend on you on that these are must-have items. So I'm totally supportive as this process emerges for us, for the exact reasons that Councilmember Orozco brought up, is that we have to go out and look at scale to ourselves, to our residents, to our neighbors, to our family, about what these rates are. So I'm supportive of having these discussions about CIP, and whether it's years 2 through 5 or 3 through 5, whatever, just being able to have it so that we can understand the choices we're making, and we can certainly convey that more clearly. It's easy for us to kind of convey an impact fee because it translates to a park, or an impact fee because it translates to X. This is one where we're not sewage engineers, we're not water engineers. We can't, that's why I was asking the basic question on the water one, because they can relate to, we have really good water, because they go to the breweries and the brewers say, this is really good water. We get all these food people and it's really good water. And they want to know, is this what you can relate that cost to, it takes to maintain it. The same thing here. And I appreciate the work you're doing to try to translate that. It's just as we continually bring it back, I can see now the value of that conversation and how we address these as a council. So I'm totally supportive of that approach.
Mayor Pro Tem Joe Henderson.
Yeah, just maybe to play off that a bit, and when you're prioritizing these things, I'm sure most of these items are fairly systemic, that they're pieces of a larger system. So when you prioritize, you're going to look at dropping a component out that doesn't disrupt the rest of the system. So, and it could be that, one item that's fairly inexpensive, you can't drop it out because that's an essential component to make the rest of the system work. So imagine when you do come back and look at some prioritization, as we look at the different levels of funding and potential rate increases, we'll be able to kind of see that a little bit clearer.
Ms. Handine?
I think I'll echo you, Mayor. I thought this was a really great report. I liked that we could see what was under the line, so to speak, and how the decisions were being made, because I think that's where questions come back to us, like, how did you make the decision? Why are we doing this? And I think to your point, Mr. Roscoe, I think the community's expecting us, and to Mr. Ledesma, people are expecting us to kind of be behind these rate increases, so we really do need to have the understanding. But it was incredibly helpful to see the projects that are being proposed and then what was underneath them.
Isn't there rate increases with respect to the Echo Water project as well to the citizens? Am I mistaken?
The which project?
Echo Water project, there's a $4 increase that's anticipated.
So I think that's Regional San.
Correct.
And they're actually coming to I believe they're coming to council at our next council meeting to give us a briefing.
Okay.
So that's an addition, I believe.
Okay, see, that's my concern, is that if our ratepayers are facing increases from a variety of different areas, then, of course, this is going to be more of a sensitive issue.
Right. We were cognizant of that. We realized that Regional Sand's going to ask for $1. In our case, we're asking for 25 cents. And that's why we're only funding less than $9 million out of 55 million CIP.
And thank you, by the way, for all of your care and diligence in this report. It is a very good report, and I appreciate your working with us on this.
Yeah, and in the end, I mean, we're struggling with these issues, and Mr. Roscoe's raised exactly the questions that I think really inspired us in December to dive much more deeply here. Thank God our residents don't live in another city, because if you watch what your rates have done in just our two sister cities in Yolo County, where they've gone up 10, 20, 50, 100-fold. And they're paying way more than we are, but also the change has been really, really, really dramatic, and that has been accomplished by generations of good planning and engineering and public works, but also generations of councils, kind of just steadily with a couple of exceptions, steadily making the appropriate adjustments that were needed in order to avoid a point where you're like, okay, the whole system's now falling apart, and now we're going to spend a lot of money and increase rates by an exorbitant amount. These are not trivial for folks on fixed income, for sure, but compared to the the $70 rates and that sort of thing that we're seeing in some of our sister, or more than $100 rates in some of our sister cities in the county, I mean, we're on the right track. So this has been a really useful conversation. Looking forward to the part 2 that's coming to us next from the impact fees on both these topics and further refinement. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 25 is workshop on the Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project.
24.
Oh, 24. Wait, what's 24? Oh, parking meters. Sorry. Okay. Consideration of workshop, item 24 is consideration of workshop and granting authority for the procurement of parking meters and approval of parking meter installation plan for the Bridge District.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Chris Doherty with the Public Works Department. This evening, the item before you is a workshop on the procurement of parking meters for the Bridge District and the installation plan to install them. With me this evening, I have Mike King from the City of Sacramento. Mike oversees the technology for the City of Sacramento's parking department, from everything from on-street meters to parking garages to what is in the enforcement vehicles, and all the technology that ties them together is under Mike's purview, and he's been really beneficial for us moving through this process, guiding us in our decision-making process for parking meters. So with that, In October of 2016, City Council approved a set of measures to alleviate the street parking demand in the Bridge District. The plan included the construction of a new parking lot on 5th and Bridge Street, which is slated to be completed by April 1st at this point. It also called for the installation of parking meters throughout the Bridge District. This plan effectively changed the street parking from a residential long-term vehicle storage in the Bridge District to a short-term parking solution to more, to serve the emerging commercial uses in the district. In December 2016, City Council heard a workshop to select the type of parking meter technology to move forward with. The council supported staff's recommendation to use a similar technology to the City of Sacramento's pay-by-plate or pay-and-display machine. They were mostly chosen because they were compatible with our existing enforcement regime, and they could also help us manage the parking lot on 5th and Bridge that is moving forward. Wrong direction. So tonight, staff has returned with a recommendation on the procurement of parking meters and the installation locations. Our recommendation is to purchase the parking meters directly from the manufacturer, Parkion. This will give us the newest, most current model of meters out there. And it will allow us to also, they come with a robust software platform behind the scenes with a ton of analytics that allows us to manage parking very efficiently through the cash management and through the actual parking utilization in the back end. One point of note, the meter that is in the staff report in front of you, we've made a slight change in our recommendation. The meter that is in there is the Strata Evolution, which is in the picture here to the left. We have changed our recommendation to move to the Strata PAL model. That was definitely in consultation with the City of Sacramento. That bigger, brighter color screen that comes with that model, we feel will be better for our residents to input their license plates and to use them both in bright sunlight and all year round. They also provide a little additional functionality that we could deploy in the future if the opportunity presents itself. There is a slight increase in cost to these meters. They are approximately $1,000 more per unit, but they do. But even with the additional cost, the entire price of the project installed comes in well under budget of what we originally had called for. We are also asking for your comment and approval on an installation plan shown here. We are looking to install 10 parking meters in the Bridge District, 2 of which will be managing the parking lot on 5th and Bridge. And the other 8 remaining would be managing the approximately 340 parking spaces throughout the Bridge District. As you'll see here, they are somewhat more densely populated around the current activity areas. As the Bridge District does develop and mature through the next few years, we would look at adding more parking meters in areas of new activity centers that would need some more dense parking meters installed. Sorry. As noted in the report, staff would return to, when we came back to council, we would talk about if the parking meters we had chosen had the technology to do the tiered-based pricing model, or the 2+ as we are calling it, which allows people to pay an additional fee past the time limit parking at an additional rate. We are happy to announce these meters do have that technology, and we are recommending moving forward with that. They also have the ability to do special event pricing because we are in an area with an arena, with Rayleigh Field. This will allow us to schedule in rate increases on days where we have an existing Rayleigh Field event so that we do not directly compete with the existing Rayleigh Field parking there. The idea there is we would not want to compete with them. We would want to be slightly above so that our assets are kept for the other commercial uses where the existing parking regime would be in existence for Rayleigh Field. In addition to that, since the city of Sacramento has effectively established a comparable market for on-street parking rates in this region, staff is looking to replicate that rate structure and model moving forward. We will be returning to council in March with an ordinance amendment to amend the fees, to establish all these fees, and have a much broader discussion about this topic at that time. This item went to the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission last night at a special meeting, and it was supported. We had great comments associated with it. There were a couple of comments and concerns that were associated, and they are, one comment was would paid parking this early in the Bridge District, would it deter the attractive center that it's turning into? Someone asked if with the paid parking, can we increase the bike and pedestrian access to the Bridge District? And we're already doing that in a few other ways, so that was already happening. And then how are we communicating this to the existing residents in the Bridge District? As noted in the map, the parking meters were sparse in certain areas, but we'll see that changing moving forward. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, as also Mike King is available for any questions you may have as well.
Ms. Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The parking meters being sparse in certain areas, you mentioned that that's going to change?
As new development comes into the Bridge District, we would probably be adding additional meters down the road where new activity centers would be, where people would be going.
In your presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had mentioned that there were going to be 10 total, but about approximately 8 would be available for approximately 340 parking spots. So that's one of these pay meters for approximately 42 parking spaces?
Correct.
Okay. So how would that impact somebody who had a disability or someone who was old and unable or had mobility issues? Would that be you would imagine, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but someone paying at a particular meter and having to travel all the way back, especially if they forgot their license plate number and had to go back and
Sure.
input it?
We did locate them far more densely around the areas that people are currently going and where people live. So we feel that they're more accessible in those areas right now. The one area that would be a little sparse would be along Riverfront. Right now would be, and that's where a lot of the actual numbers of parking spaces are. We could add more in the future. I'm happy to do that. It just depends on when we start looking at revenue generation and how much money we want to put into these, back into the parking assets in the field.
But hypothetically speaking, if we were at the older model, and I'm not saying that we would, but would we be able to afford more meters?
So the cost per unit is $1,000 per unit. We're buying 10, so it would be paying for effectively one additional unit, if that was the case. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, in terms of options, I would prefer the option one, I think is a staff recommendation, just on the technology, but I know in the past we discussed the different types of meters and the kind of data that you can obtain from these, and some of the companies would keep the data basically, and they would give you reports based on whatever you wanted the data to say, and some others would have that data that you could actually real-time access for your own use. So this particular company, which is that?
We would have access to a cloud-based software platform. We would come in and write our own reports and customize everything we would need right directly out of that back-end software.
Okay, and that data would include if the space is occupied, the current rate,
Yes.
time of day.
Yeah.
It may include license plate numbers, which, for example, if you open that data up to the public, you'd want to scrub a little bit of that.
We would.
But it would be possible to open some of that up.
It is.
For part of our open data policy.
And the one thing I did also forget to mention is installed, this comes with the Park Mobile application from day one. So there would be some level of the smartphone application integration built in from the day we start.
Yeah, I would think that part of the program, I mean, there's a limited number of units that we're going to be installing, that it'd be a good test to try and see, kind of work on this data and see maybe, once it's available, start engaging the community and find ways to actually utilize that data.
Yeah.
So, all right, thanks.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Chris, for the update and kind of where we are. I know we've been going around on this, kind of the parking meter, and finally here to kind of, it just giving you direction on how we want to implement this. A couple of questions. First on budget. I understand you're going to the different, you're making a recommendation, and we have allocated to the CIP 150,000. So we're under. But, so I think the point that's being made, if as more development happens, and we're monitoring that, or are we monitoring activity so that, I'm trying to get to the point of, if we decide we do want another 2 meters, because the activity around Whaley Field or on the barn is generating more interest, or whatever, are we going to be able to monitor that, and will we have dollars still within that CIP allocation to get 1 or 2?
Yes.
I'm not saying we do. I get your approach at this point, because I think that's what I think I want to make sure we can have the flexibility for, and not kind of coming up short to get the better model, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's still a fair amount of amount left in the CIP. If we did see a need to purchase more, we could do that.
Okay. Because I think that's, and you also put in your staff report that you're looking at to verify the option of the 2-tier, the 2+ tier system work. So it does work with that?
It
The
does.
model we're getting? Okay,
Yes.
because there's a series, if it doesn't, then, or there's a series questions that are within there. So if it does, then I guess that's moot. I guess the only other question I had is just around ensuring that as we go to this and the communication of it. I think the commission probably had a good sense of the change that's happening in the bridge. We've been pretty lax around some of the enforcement around that area. We want people to be at the barn. We saw in the summer, and we really haven't. This will be the first really implementation, which I'm supportive of. But to your point, making sure we communicate with the parking standards and with the meters, it will be important to have a really good, robust communication plan around this about alternative ways to get to the bridges. I think that is a very worthwhile feedback from the commission, because I think last year at the barn, I know several times we saw residents for the first time get on their bikes and come up the branch line trail and make their way to the bridge district. Now that the Village Parkway is open, there's absolutely more opportunity to do that. And I know at least at some point we were looking at improving the bike entrance into underneath the freeway on 5th Street, how we can better manage that. So those are all good communication points. People don't want to pay the parking or don't want to deal with it. It's just to make sure we are concurrently working on that as well. So, thank you.
Ms. Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report. And I think I already know the answer to this question, but we're still working with the city of Sacramento for enforcement.
Correct.
Correct. And so they will have, obviously, access to all of the software with the system.
Yes, I've been working with the vendor and with Mike to make sure that the integration is fairly seamless, so
Okay.
that when you put in your license plate, there's not an hour lag for the car to get there.
Great.
So people won't get tickets, because that's the wrong PR message that we want to send. Want to make sure that's a really seamless transition. It works really well.
Thanks. And for some reason, reading this report, I know we shouldn't be excited perhaps about having parking meters, but it made me think about how we're a destination, and so having to be in the situation of actually having our first, I don't know if these are the first ever parking meters in West Sacramento, but okay, they are the first ever,
Yeah.
that we're trying to come up with a solution to being a popular place to be. So in some ways, it's exciting that we're actually taking this step.
I am excited about it. So, because I don't see the parking meters principally as somebody coming from somewhere else to use them. Because this is where I live, and urban development is very, very different. And urban placemaking is very, very different. And so I just want to counsel, I'm very supportive of this, and I think that, this is exactly the right approach, but taking a user slice that's only considering people as parkers will lead to the wrong outcomes. People are mainly coming because they want the activity. They want to enjoy the river, they want to enjoy the music, they want to go to a place to eat, they want to hang out at the park. That's what the district is about, and that fails if there is not sufficient parking available and alternatives available. And that for sufficient parking to be available, there has to be turnover that's regular. There has to be, it can't be residential parking for folks who have 5 cars with a 2-car garage and a driveway, so they still need 1 more space. It can't be any of those things. So when we design around the parker, and like, what's the parker really want, and what do they really need, we miss the point, which is we're creating a place. So this is, this is the right place. I mean, it's going to be a hassle for me and for everybody else that lives there and that doesn't, and dealing with the meters ourselves. I mean, I love just driving in with my groceries and pulling them out in the front, parking there and going in. It doesn't cost me anything, but no one else can use it while that's happening. And as I said on the earlier item, just watching what's happened to Burgers and Brew, and which is fantastic, right? That's exactly what we want. Drake's could certainly create exactly that same challenge, and hopefully the thing that follows Drake's and the thing after that will happen. And we don't get 2 years to think about it, right? Burgers and Brew, we didn't get a 2-year planning process. We didn't get to go do a bunch of neighborhood outreach and get everybody on board and all of that. It just happened. This kind of a metering strategy allows for that to happen organically without creating expectations like we have had. The parking is going to be free and ubiquitous and available for everybody either to store or to arrive at any moment. So this is exactly the right way to proceed. Something on the payment modalities, I'm going to be very interested in seeing the data. Right, because we're talking tonight as though most people will be using these stations to pay their parking, and I suspect that's if it's not already changing in Sacramento, it's going to change. That the Park Mobile app, I mean, if you're going to use a meter, if you're going to use metered parking in either now West Sacramento or Sacramento more than once a month, it's way simpler. Just load your credit card information in your phone and use that. So a large number of people will be using that instead, and that curve is going to go way up. So I find it hard to imagine a scenario in which you're going to come back in a year or two and say, hey, you know what, we need to double the number of meters per square foot. Precisely for that reason, because it's way simpler. You're sitting in your car, you don't need to remember your license plate number, you don't have to get it, you don't have to stand in the rain while you're doing it. It's just a natural thing, and it's the same thing that you do at Golden One, it's the same thing that you do in Midtown, it's the same thing you do everywhere in the urban core, and that will become much more natural. So that's a theory. I mean, although that is what's happening in other cities. So the data will be important to see is how are people actually paying. And does that vary based on land use context and other stuff? Be able to connect it to the analytics to see really, there may still be places where the uses and the kinds of folks that are using them do require the pay stations, and they require more of them. So we should pay attention to the data. But I just want to flag that it may not be what we're thinking in terms of that. Like I don't have any quarters in my car anymore. The Park Mobile app is also frustrating in some other ways, so that's not perfect, but I think it's the right, we're heading down the right path in that sense. And also I can add money to it while I'm not there, which I can't, so if I'm if I go to the bar, at the bar and we're sitting down and we're eating and I have a taco in my hand and I want to run back and put more money in the station, I can do it on my phone. Those sorts of small enhancements folks start to depend on them, and which is why the usage of the phone in order to pay for a large number of the users will, I think, is inevitably going to grow. Curious, do you have a sense of what? So you said Sacramento's rates, but this is not really Sacramento. I mean, this area is not yet Sacramento in terms of its number of attractions. So I'm just curious, like, what is per hour? What are you contemplating the range of rates might be, or per 20 minutes or whatever? So I guess Sacramento's down to like per 8 seconds or whatever. But
So we are still working through some of that, but I think there are some logical connections that $1.75 an hour has been kind of regionally accepted, and it's been moving forward. It might make sense to start there and then readjust. So it's hard to find comparative models in this environment that are very equal to our size of a city, adjacent to a larger city. So there are some really natural connections that exist there. So that might be a starting place for us, but we're working through that very quickly.
All right. I'm partly curious for just the market rate piece. The other is, the histrionics aside, I'm trying to pay attention to what was said earlier about the parking in the area. What that real issue was about is it's all about habitat, right? It has nothing to do with park moderns, it has nothing to do with river markets, all about habitat and marketability for habitat, and particularly for residents that are already in habitat. So I'm just trying to find ways, tools that might open up other solutions, knowing that there isn't a single solution and that the habitat residents over time have to adjust. I mean, there's no matter what one developer thought 2 years ago or what one resident thinks today, that's not a sustainable strategy. But one of those spaces might be, since we would now be allowing overnight parking under this suite of activities, that you could park at 10 right until the morning without any charge, which you cannot do today because you're violating the 90-minute rule. You can park on the street at 10. If you paid for an hour or for 2 hours before that, right, then it starts to be possible to imagine a world in which you're paying roughly the same as the $50 a month charge to have parking provided for you in habitat itself. So that's not by itself a solution, but it does point to possibilities in the system. So the second question in that space is, can you in this system, either through the app or at the station, can you have customized rates or promo code rates or license plate linked rates? So if we fed into the data system, here are the license plates for the following 20 cars associated with habitat. And so we want their rate to be $1 an hour after 5 o'clock, but before 10. Is that? And I'm not proposing that. I'm just asking the capabilities of the system to be able to do something like that that's license plate linked.
It's my understanding it is, because we are going to be using the license plate link to deal with the monthly parking that'll be happening in the Bridge District parking lot.
Gotcha.
So because the parking lot will not be gate controlled, we'll just utilize our existing enforcement regime to go by, and the license plate reader will say monthly, hourly,
Gotcha.
not paid, as it goes through.
Okay. And just in case you're looking at this tape later on, I'm really referring to Habitat East. Habitat West is within
Sure.
It's within a block and a half of the new parking lot. So that solution is why the council appropriated the funds in order to make that solution happen. But for Habitat East, it's a little bit farther. So if there was an interest at some point in dealing with that issue, and Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson signaled some interest in doing that technology may make it possible to think of things that we had not had in the toolbox before that could be customized, time limited, and wind down over time in order to continue to make sure that we have a turnover of parking in the district. Last question, and maybe it turns out to be related to this, but this system allows you to reserve parking or no? Or technologically we would have to decide if we wanted to allow that?
Yes, I
Right.
believe so. It's my understanding, and I haven't had training on the system yet, because we haven't purchased the system yet, and it does come with training for me and several other staff to get that back-end training. It is a very robust back-end when it comes to the rate structure, however we want to set it up. There are a lot of tools built into that.
I guess I think so. I was asking this because Sacramento has been advertising that you could reserve your parking in advance for the Golden One Center. But is that true for street parking or only for structures?
So it's my understanding that that's only for the structured parking, but I will defer to my.
Okay. So it wouldn't apply in this particular case. Gotcha. We could have used it for the lot potentially, but we couldn't do it for. It's not a natural thing, at least at this point, for street parking. Which would be hard to do.
Reservations for on-street.
Yeah, okay, that does make sense. Okay, thanks.
And
Ms.
Mr.
Roscoe?
Mayor, yes, I'd like to just echo the sentiments that you put forth with respect to, what we hope in the future to be the case. I mean, it would be ideal if we only did need the 10 units, and that would suffice for everyone because we were using alternative methods and means. But at the same time, because the amenities that we have there should be accessible to all, I just want to make sure that we're sensitive to the fact that not everybody may have, the most up-to-date technology or, have the capabilities. I mean, in an ideal world, I think we don't want everybody to have that, but until we do, that's the reason why I'm voicing my concern. But I think it's a fantastic idea, Chris. And one of the questions I had was, you showed the two meters, and they both were really cool and modern. I'm wondering, the one that we intend to purchase, has that been used in Sacramento already?
So They are, I'll defer to Mike on that.
Sure. A very similar model has been used in Sacramento. In our purposes, we use it in lots. But the technology that the city of West Sacramento is looking at is newer technology. And certainly, if we had to start all over again, that's what we would be looking at.
Okay. I noticed that it had a little keyboard in the front. I mean, how durable is the system? I mean, it seems like it would be a little attractive nuisance to folks who wanted to just go and press buttons. And you see every 5-year-old running to the elevator to press the up button. I mean, it's an expensive unit. Are we able to make sure that it doesn't get vandalized, or, how expensive would it be to repair in the case of vandalism or otherwise?
I can't quote specific prices on
Sure.
parts, but I can tell you that we do not see a lot of vandalism with those machines. I've been with the city for 4 years, and I've seen 2 that have been vandalized, and the person never got to the funds or the change. Typically, the worst thing is somebody will scratch the display to make a statement. These new machines actually have a more scratch-resistant display, so it's a lot more tamper-resistant. The keyboard is a touch-sensitive keyboard. It's not actual hard keys that are pressed, but rather an overlay that signals to the pressure pad behind it which letters are being pressed. So it's not like somebody can take a chisel and get the letters off or so forth. And that plastic keypad is pretty cheap to replace if somebody does damage that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Oh, thank you. How is maintenance handled on these?
So we have a few options for maintenance on that. We have been in talks with the city of Sacramento to have them handle the maintenance for that. We are exploring that option. They're also under a 1-year warranty when we purchase them, so we'd get a level of maintenance with that if something were to go wrong for the first year. So we have a little time to kind of explore some of that to see if it's going to be an issue or not.
Yeah, it was just one of the options here, and we hadn't talked, I mean, we talked about having a cash or a credit card, but banknotes, those typically are, in a lot of cases, jam, and there's only going to be a certain number of these units in the area.
So-
Does that increase the maintenance cost to have that option?
Not only does it increase the maintenance cost, it increases the cash collection costs, and it significantly increases the actually per unit cost. It's $1,000 additional per unit to have a bill selector in there, whereas they already take coins and they take credit cards.
Okay, yeah, that answers it, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Great, all right, so we have the recommendation before us. This is a huge net win, right? I mean, right now, under our current system, folks who want to come, regardless of how they want to pay, cannot find a place to park at all. And Garden Park, which is a terrific amenity, is not available to them. And this sort of policy is what's necessary to activate that for the broadest range of our residents, that whether they live there or not. So I think it's good work. Thanks to the city of Sacramento for their partnership, and there's a lot of creative solutions on our team as well to make this happen. So, all right, is there a motion on the item?
Move the recommended action.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Orozco, seconded by Ms. Sandin. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, item 25 is a workshop on the Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project.
Good evening, Council. Jason McCoy, Senior Transportation Planner, Public Works. I do have a PowerPoint presentation teed up, but I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce 2 members of the audience. We have Kirk Trost with SACOG, and I'm also joined by John Balsecki, who is some of the council is familiar with. He is the project manager for the streetcar project hired by SACOG on behalf of the city of Sacramento and the city of West Sacramento. I'd like to ask him to come up and introduce himself to the whole council, if it pleases the council.
I think he's really introducing himself to Ms. Orozco, because the rest of us are on the streetcar policy
Gonna
committee
say,
or alternates.
three of you have met me already, so I'll keep this brief. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be managing this project. My background with the thinning gray hair has been rail transit my entire career. Worked North America, Asia, pretty much everywhere, but this project really excites me. I get to go home every night to see my wife and not get on a plane. And more than that, I think I can deliver you a really good streetcar project for both sides of the river. It's a project with challenges, but that's what I like, and it's a project with a lot of opportunities as well. So, any questions?
No, let's go. Let's make this project happen now.
We're moving, believe me. Thank you.
And I think this is the first time Mr. Trost is here as the acting CEO of SACOG, so welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Council, the item before you is an update on the downtown Riverfront streetcar project. This project continues to make significant progress over the last few months since the last time this was brought before the council. So I'd like to go ahead and present to you some of the progress that's been made in the realm of engineering, governance, and utilities. The map before you is also not new, but it does identify the looped alignment of the entire system, extending from the West Sacramento Civic Center all the way to 19th Street in Midtown Sacramento. Also included on the map as a thinner black line is Riverfront Street extension, extending from Rayleigh Field to Pioneer Bridge, US 50. Project funding continues to be a top priority of the project management team. We have been able to secure a significant amount of funding. Primarily here, the city of West Sacramento has provided funds from Measure V as well as the CFD and the Bridge District for a total of $35 million toward the project. City of Sacramento and Sacramento combined a total of $10 million toward the project. We also recently received an award of cap and trade funds through the TIRCP, that's the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. The cap and trade proceeds plus the Prop 1A funds, which is high-speed rail funds, total of $55 million in state contribution. This balances out with the projected costs of the project that equal $200 million. And those are identified here, including construction costs, the streetcar vehicles themselves, the maintenance facility, stations, and the built-in contingency. Scheduling continues to be updated. In fact, we are in the middle of an update on the schedule. We do have significant milestones that we're going to be meeting, which is primarily why we're also bringing this before the council today. We will be returning in March with the governance documents. I'll be later in the presentation here talking about the governance structure and the progress that we've made toward that. The Policy Steering Committee did receive an update on that as well. So as far as the documentation goes, you'll be seeing that most likely on March 1st in order to tee up for the vote in the city of Sacramento for operations and maintenance. We are in the process of completing the 50% engineering design for the project. We're anticipating that 85% design will be completed July 2017, and we're looking at April 2018 for 100% design completion. Vehicle procurement bid package has been completed. It's going to be released next month. We're anticipating that we're going to go through the full procurement process on that, and we do have John Valsecki here to help us with a lot of experience to get through that process along with RT. The mainline project construction utility relocation is set to commence from September 2018 through February 2020. We're looking at revenue service now at April 2021. That's a slight deviation from the previous schedule, but we are continuing to make significant progress. The Riverfront Street and Maintenance Facility, we're looking at completion August 2021, but we might be updating the schedule to see if we can't flip-flop that and get the Riverfront Street extension completed prior to the initiating of the streetcar line. There we go. The next series of slides I'm going to go through rather rapidly. This is the alignment 50% design that we've made progress on in West Sacramento. What you see before you is starting at the Civic Center. This is directly across from City Hall. There is, and actually, probably the best thing I can do is use the mouse, I think. This location where the mouse is pointing to is the proposed platform for the streetcar itself. This area right here that I'm identifying is the mid-block crossing that extends over to the transit center from West Sacramento City Hall. This little outline that you see right here is actually the heritage tree that's in front of City Hall, and we've looked at several different ways to avoid having to remove that tree, and unfortunately, every option that we've looked at is going to require that. But we will be looking at mitigation for removal of trees. A few other things that need to be identified as we move down the alignment. We're going to be providing signal prioritization at every signalized intersection to allow the streetcar to proceed ahead of traffic, to reduce any kind of potential conflicts between vehicles, and also allow the streetcar itself to proceed without any delay.
Yeah, and by 2021, Fifth Street will be, Fifth and Tower Bridge Gate will be fixed as the worst intersection in the whole, in this hemisphere? Because I can't imagine like being stopped at Fifth and Tower Bridge Gateway today and almost be ready to go, and then a streetcar comes by and you wait again, so that your total wait time is 12 minutes?
We do have, so we have to maintain our headways with the streetcar as part of what the FTA is going to require. We will also be needing to make significant improvements to the intersection. We are going to have to look at improving our software for our traffic signals, which all of this is going to be incorporated into the streetcar project. The answer I can tell you is that we will work on it.
No, you have to have it, whatever we're doing with the West Capitol remnant or whatever, we have to have that done by 2021.
By 2021, everything will be in place, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So moving on in this area, I'm going to try to rapidly get through these. Some of the things that we're looking at are the street lighting. Currently, street lights exist down West Capitol. Those street lights would have to be removed and replaced by overhead catenary system. We are looking at installing street lights above the OCS. That does present maintenance issues, so we're going to have to work through those issues through the agreements that we have with the future Streetcar Inc. This is as we round the curve toward Grand, formerly Garden Street. We're going to be required to remove one of the left-hand turn lanes that's heading east onto Tower Bridge Gateway. We did an analysis of traffic to make sure that this wouldn't have a significant impact. It does not. We actually we're over capacity with these two left-hand turn lanes. What it also enables us to do is to widen out the existing median to put OCS system in the median. It also allows us to put a bike lane on the southern half of that street where currently there is none. This is the intersection of Tower Bridge Gateway and Grand. One thing that's a main issue is we have these tail tracks that are currently being designed as part of the project. This is something that would enable the light rail vehicles, if they were to come over Tower Bridge to service Rayleigh Field on a seasonal basis. It allows that vehicle to come down the tail track and turn around and head toward the Rayleigh Field station. As you saw in your staff report, this is one of the things that staff is requesting of council, is to prioritize the development of the streetcar system over LRT in order to work on the Riverfront Street. That doesn't preclude us going back to have light rail service in the future. So you see here, we have the streetcar station that's currently in existence. We have officially constructed the first streetcar stop of the streetcar line in West Sacramento. That existing island that's there now in front of what was the Delta Lane project is going to be enabled to have streetcar service as well as having bus transit behind it. We're going to mirror that same design on the other side as part of the Grand Gateway plan. We are looking at traction power substations along the line. We're coordinating with our economic development team to find the best locations for those. One of the main issues over here is bus turnouts. We're going to have to look at relocating bus turnouts to accommodate the streetcar stations. As we continue through to 3rd Street here, we're over at Rayleigh Field. This is where the potential platform for both light rail transit and streetcar are going to be. We've been doing our best to negotiate the design of this so that there would be very few conflicts between bikes and pedestrians and the streetcar itself. So moving on. This is a pretty interesting area here. This is where my mouse is showing. This is the approach to Tower Bridge. In this location, north and south of this area is Riverwalk. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to allow for safe movement of pedestrians in this location. It serves two purposes. By having a signalized crossing in that location, we could actually stop vehicles to allow for the streetcar to continue through the intersection of 3rd and Tower Bridge Gateway without any kind of conflicts with through vehicles. At one point, the streetcar itself would actually have to go into the left-hand turn right here, which could in the future present some conflicts. That would actually prevent that from happening, and it would allow pedestrians to cross in that location in the future. So it serves three purposes. We are continuing to investigate that. Regarding the governance structure, this was presented to the Policy Steering Committee. I actually have some notes here to make sure that I cover every little bit of this. Currently under consideration is the governance documents. Those will be brought to you in March. The current structure that we're looking at for the JPA is a 5-member board. 2 of each city is going to be serving on that, with the 5th member actually elected by those members of the JPA. Originally, the JPA was structured so it could be more broad as a riverfront JPA. In the last week, City of Sacramento has expressed some concerns with having a broader JPA. We were thinking maybe in the future we could incorporate C Street Bridge, future Broadway Bridge, perhaps operations and maintenance. They have requested that we take a more refined approach to that and limit it just to the streetcar project. So our team is currently working, Jeff Mitchell and the rest of the attorneys are working on the documentation for that in order to revise the documents. As part of this structure, there would be Streetcar Inc., as I had mentioned before, which is a nonprofit 501c that would actually be in charge of the operations, maintenance, and management of the streetcar system, whereas the assets themselves would be owned by the JPA. The JPA would delegate the management to Streetcar Inc. Streetcar Inc. would be a 7-member board, 3 on each city, and then the 7th member would actually be elected by the JPA. I think that pretty much wraps up the governance structure. We did take this to the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission for a lovely Valentine's evening, and they did provide some comments to us with regard to the potential for federal funding, the role of YCTD. Maybe I should answer a couple of these. As far as the federal funding goes, we're in kind of uncharted territory with that. There is no budget. Usually we see something, this project would be in the federal budget for February. What we understand now is that we won't be hearing until June as to whether or not the streetcar project will actually be in the federal budget. We are hearing some rumors that there may not actually be a budget that gets approved, in which case we would just have to wait and see the level of comfort of the FTA as to how much would be funded for the project. The role of YCTD, I explained that YCTD has been a partner on the project. They continue to sit in all the PMT meetings.
You don't have to cover all the answers. I mean, unless they're policy relevant for us.
No.
If you answered them in commission.
Okay, you got it. Any questions from the council?
Are there any questions? And several of, at the last streetcar policy steering committee, not the alignment issues that you just described in terms of the preliminary design were discussed, but the governance, the JPA agreements, the Streetcar Inc., the relationship with RT. The steering committee spent a lot of time diving into the details and the dynamics and the incentives and the relative governance. So a lot of care has gone into that work, in addition to the work by the attorney team. So I think at least several of us, if there are additional questions, several of us were knee deep in the governance pieces. But Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson.
Thank you. Yeah, when are we going to have the conceptualization of the maintenance facility?
We actually did some preliminary concepts, I believe, in early 2015. There was a draft document that was produced that identified 2 maintenance facilities, one in the city of Sacramento at the WX and 19th, where existing track is. There was a number of different alternatives looked there. There was also different alternatives looked at over on the West Sacramento side. Once that was environmentally cleared, we could move forward with either location. At this point, what we're waiting for is to determine whether or not we've received the federal funding that's going to be required to install the Riverfront Street track. Once we do that, once we have that okay, then we know that we're going to be moving forward with a maintenance facility over in the West Sacramento side. This from several PMT meetings that weighed the pros and cons along with Caltrans that sits in every PMT meeting. They also determined that there's a lot of conflicts on the Sacramento side with regard to utilities that don't exist on the Sacramento side that don't exist on the West Sacramento side. So the PMT made a decision that it was a preferred location in West Sacramento provided funding was available.
Yeah, I just think when it gets down to the point of, when it looks like that would happen, that to look at this station as a destination as well and not just a maintenance facility, because it would be the end of the line. There is a lot of, some cities, Vancouver, BC, for one, that have utilized under freeway land for basically civic use. I think they have kind of an art type setup that's underneath that. But this would be kind of an end of the line type thing. So at that point, I'd like to discuss the aesthetics of that and multiple uses of that particular area.
I believe as soon as we get word about the funding, then we could kick that process off for sure. And we also have been working with our Economic Development Department to tee up the property in that area to enable us to move forward quickly once we receive word. So at that point, when we know where the location is, we know what property we're dealing with, we could definitely work on a design charrette, for instance.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for this, for the update, and super excited to kind of have this. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, the last Streetcar Policy Committee meeting was one of the more robust ones we've had with real substantive issues, because we're kind of coming to that critical point of implementation and planning that really kind of puts it into scope what we're doing, and nothing more illustrates that than the attachment 1 in terms of showing the line, what we contemplated, where the main parts of ridership may occur because of the attractions nearby or the amenities nearby. So I'm just really thrilled that we're kind of at this point, cautious because of where we are with the federal point. And so I have a couple of questions. I know you mentioned, I understand that for a long time we've been working towards getting both cities in alignment on the financing piece with the cap and trade money. Injection into this project was a huge boost. And now the issues of governance, the issues of design planning are now falling into place. But now we have a potential problem at the federal level in terms of the process we're in. So my question is with the notion that maybe a budget won't be available until June, if it's available at all. If that doesn't mean we stop on this current pace we're on. Is that a true statement, that we're going to keep moving? I can see this by the documents. Governance is coming together. I'll be back here on March 1st, back at Policy Committee. All the other documents will continue on a pace without regard to what may happen.
That is a fact. We have allocated funds, both cities have allocated funds toward project development. So we know that this project has received a medium-high rating from the FTA, so we're in good standing with the FTA. They certainly support the project. We have support here locally for the project as well. So we would be continuing through our project development funding that's already been allocated to make sure that the project is teed up at any point in time that we're ready to ramp it up again if, for instance, there's some kind of stall at the federal level.
Right, okay. And that's good to hear, because I know a lot of people, particularly Mr. Trost and our city manager, our mayor, have been, I've attended a couple of meetings at FTA, trying to keep this balance and showing them what we're working on. And so I'm glad they're still supportive and we can continue on that pace. The second issue is around the JPA and the feedback from the city of Sacramento on scope of the JPA, I guess, is the issue. Is that just is that a bandwidth issue, or do we need to, I mean, I'm directionally fine as long as we can keep the streetcar project moving, but they did contemplate, we were contemplating other, the scope of thinking about the C Street Bridge and the Broadway Bridge or whatever else. It's just something where nobody's got a capacity issue. No, let's not worry about it. Let's get it,
well, if
stay efficient. Is that?
Would you like to?
I mean, we could always come back and amend the JPA when we have a discussion on C Street Bridge or some other joint project. I wouldn't let this one hold up our efforts on the streetcar.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking more specifically, was there an issue of, again, I'm totally supportive of this moving forward without it, but is there any other issues related to the streetcar that maybe have them peel back? I'm not sure if I'm making my point clear.
I just don't think these other issues are rising to a priority for the city of Sacramento. This one is.
Okay. And that's fair. So I'm fine with it. I just needed to ask the question. And then the, regarding how the line, I think a policy question for us is putting forward the streetcar, prioritizing that ahead of light rail. Is there anything that, what's the downside of that? I mean, from my understanding, based on policy, on the streetcar committee meeting, that we're available to come back and capture the light rail connections at a later date. Is that basically true? Because this would mean we don't have to build the platforms you have to build for light rail. So is there any other issues in not going forward with light rail?
If I could respond to that from an engineering perspective, no, because the streetcar line itself is actually being engineered to accommodate light rail vehicle movements anyway. So this was one of the directives from the council's request to, in the future, accommodate LRT vehicles. All of our engineering has been designed to that requirement. As far as environmental, we've already got the environmental clearance for LRT over Rayleigh Field, so from that perspective, it's not an issue. What this would enable us to do is to focus our attention from spending additional time beyond the 50% design on LRT and shift that over toward Riverfront Street, where we can see right now we have not been progressing on Riverfront Street alignment to
Right.
50%. This would enable us to do that.
Right, which I'm 100% supportive of. I just want to make sure we're not unintentionally can't get back to the light rail should we find the funding for it. So if I may, Mr. Mayor, one more question on the role of YCTD, which I'm glad the commission brought up, and looking at the design, which is the first time you get to see it. And I think as the board member representing West Sac at YCTD, I think the opportunity for us is how do we engage them in the 3-year timeframe we're looking at to look at the routing around Tower Bridge Gateway and down the riverfront differently. We're already doing it because we're expanding the Y shuttle service, which does nothing more than mimic the shuttle service. So again, I'm just flagging the concept of moving bus turnouts and everything else. And the question is one that we need to think about is what bus service will be along it if the streetcar service in it as well. And they're already moving towards a sort of a hub and spoke model with the shuttle, bringing in the other lines from Southport or from Bright and Broderick into the area and get across. I'm not saying no other buses will cross the bridge, But I am saying that if there's opportunities for us to rethink that, I think that's my takeaway from this discussion. And so YCTD needs to be involved in it and continue to be. So, thank you.
Yeah, just on that last point, I totally agree. I mean, we have right now we're building significant transit-oriented developments, and we don't have transit service. And we're still, we've had this debate a couple times before. We're running bus service in fundamentally non-transitable areas that can never possibly, I mean, have worked in no place anywhere in the world ever. And we're going to have to grapple with that at some point. We made a policy decision to spend all of our TDA funds on transit. For the purpose, so so that's our decision, right? So some of the discussion we've had about YCTD, we'll have to, it's there's a certain amount of money that goes to them, and so we need to allocate it based on those routes. That's ultimately our choice. I mean, as long as they're not unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet according to the state law and the SACOG process. But yeah, I think a fundamental relook at our transit investments with the streetcar to support our actual land use policies that we've been adopting over the last several years that are no longer theoretical. And do we have sufficient transit service in the Washington District, in the Bridge District, in the Grand Gateway area, in the areas that have the densities and the land use that we know are necessary for that to succeed? And that will require some moving around because our sales tax is not growing fast enough for us to just add additional services. So I think it's going to provide a good opportunity for that conversation to happen. I'm also excited about the amount of progress that we've been making lately. I wish we'd made it a year ago. I mean, I think one lesson of November is don't take things for granted, and we could have, I mean, there were certainly scenarios in which we could have had a full funding agreement by the end of the year in the prior administration, and so we cannot let this schedule, I mean, we can't let it slide. And I know people will say, well, it's 2021, of course it's going to slide, that's just happened, you got to accept that. If you feel that happening, just walk over to the flood unit for a little while and talk to them about the GRR, which we also thought, well, that's even bigger, that's 10 times bigger, that's definitely going to slide. And it slid hardly at all. And so let's stick to that standard of delivery, because we already, when we first scoped this out for real, started to put the funding plan together when the arena was announced and the ER was done, we're trying to figure out, okay, can we open around the time of the arena? Okay, no, it's going to be within a year of the arena, and now we're already at 5 years out from the opening of the arena. So we have to exercise some discipline in order to stay on track, and it's all for good reasons. Project delays always are, but we also have to stay on them in order to get this done. So this is the right start to do that. The governance structure and structures and property owner engagement and stuff will help in that regard too. I would ask, when you're doing this kind of presentation with others, you show the capital budget. And the capital budget has us investing $35 million in Sacramento, the two Sacramentos, county and city investing $10 million. And so the natural question, if you're on this side of the river, is, wait, why is that? Why are we spending the money on the capital side? And that's because we don't show the operating budget, where I think it's essentially flipped, where we're in for $1 million, they're in for $2 million, or some similar ratio, right? So that's not shown on the charts, and so as we do more communicating and other documentation and that sort of things that's publicly visible, we ought to have that, those ought to come together. So you can see that it's not that we're, out of the goodness of our hearts, paying more than our fair share of the project. We are on the capital side, but in the long term and operating it, over 100 years, it'll all balance out. I think it's just important for the public to understand. But otherwise, I think this is, we made a lot of good progress. The governance piece is sharp. It's also changed, it can also adapt as we get into it, but I think a lot of good work's done in that space. And the design work on the stations those are all going to be complicated little, small but important issues, and it sounds like you're making some good progress on them. I love the fact that you're looking at ways to allow us to have the Riverwalk pedestrian traffic, not pretend that it's walking over to 3rd Street and back. And to have an actual, meaningful legal crosswalk there. I mean, crossing there would be is a good benefit as well. So
it looks like a serendipitous opportunity for us.
Those are the best ones. So. All right, any other comments on the item? All right, this is a workshop only, so thanks so much. Thanks, John. Thanks, Kurt. All right, that brings us to council calendar. Ms. Berlin, are you still here?
I'm still here. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Here are a couple of dates that might be of interest to you. Coming up next Thursday, February 23rd, is the LAFCO Shared Services Workshop. This will be in lieu of the regular LAFCO Commission meeting. All the council members are invited to attend, and it's an opportunity to provide some input on the shared services priorities for LAFCO's fiscal year 17-18 work plan. And then on March 22nd, Wednesday, is the next YOLO Leaders Forum. It says it's in Woodland, but we just got word that it's actually going to be at UC Davis. That programming for that event will be a TED-style talks, as they've done the past few sessions. And the focus is discussing changes in national policy and the effect on local government. Topics include the Affordable Care Act, immigration, climate change, and infrastructure. And that's 22nd from 4 to 6 p.m. And that's it.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager reports?
Just briefly, Mayor, you mentioned the Oroville Dam spillway issue that we had earlier in the week. Chief Heilman is here. I definitely want to thank him and Brian Johnson, his team, worked well with PD and Paul Hosley in our communications to keep you informed. And I just checked my iPhone. It's going to rain 100% tonight, so we're getting ready for another storm. And we'll continue to monitor the levees with RD 900 and get through this weekend again. I also wanted to highlight a memo that I prepared at the strategic plan retreat. There was a lot of discussion about sanctuary cities and immigration policies from this administration. Staff has identified 3 bills that have been introduced in the state legislature related to that, and I didn't know if there was some interest in having that posted on a future agenda for your consideration.
I'm interested, particularly in SB 54 to also potentially SB 31, since those both apply to us as a local agency. SB 6 I'm interested in as a citizen, but not, it doesn't have direct impacts on the city. But I think bringing them forward for account, we don't have existing council policy on these topics, which is why we can't use our interim position taking process for this purpose, but based on the council's direction at the strategic planning retreat, this makes eminent sense for this to come forward. Including the significant amount of legal analysis that's been done, that I think even since the retreat has diminished at least the feeling among most of the mayors I've talked to across the country and their city attorneys, a lot less feeling of risk around the federal funds in the areas that we have been interested in, transportation, flood, that sort of thing. But not that there's no risk, there never is. But our initial worry that because the executive order specifically said it was all federal funds except for law enforcement, that would be the most likely outcome. And I think a fairly broad legal consensus is the opposite. So I think it's appropriate for us to do this. It still makes sense, I think, for our citizens to be, for our residents who may be targeted by these actions to have a sense of safety and security for themselves and for their family, even when they're not in the city limits. When they're at a movie somewhere else, or at the theater, or going to a basketball game, knowing that they still have this level of protection, it makes more sense for this to be statewide and region-wide. So I think, for me at least, it's appropriate to bring it back. I don't care if there's no objection to doing so.
So we'll work with our lobbyists and bring something back at one of the meetings in March. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Anything else on city manager reports? Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Any questions? City attorney report? Staff direction from members of the council? And we have no future agenda item requests. So Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson has moved, and Ms. Orozco has seconded. The meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.